Kong Jin-Hoo becomes unemployed after suffering an accident in the army. Things looked bad because he returned to live with his mother in a small house, but the boy soon discovers that this accident gave him the ability to predict the future. His first thought is to use this power to his advantage, and with that he manages to save a good amount of money. After the protagonist uses everything he has to invest in some companies that he knows will be successful, his money starts to triple and he becomes confident in becoming the #1 investor in the world. The story begins in an ordinary town in Korea. The reporter of a local newspaper interviews some people who pass by. He asks what they would do if they suddenly got 100 million won. The first woman replies that she would try to buy a house. The man says confidently that he would buy a car. The second girl says that she would make an investment. The reporter then decides to ask the final question. He asks what is the first thing they would do if they were the richest person in the world. Obviously the answer is that they would do nothing for the rest of their lives. At that moment the opinions are analyzed by the journalist, who presents the newspaper live. She says that they are good answers and greets the guy, who is in front of her. The woman introduces him as the youngest Korean to become the richest man in the world. Then she questions what his secret is. But before the journalist also says that there are rumors that he can see the future, as we can see this guy is our protagonist Kong Jin-Hoo. He laughs and denies that he can see the future. Suddenly his eye shines a yellow light and he notices a lady near the camera operator. At that moment a huge golden eagle flies inside the room, leaving behind some words shrouded in smoke. Kong is a little paralyzed. The presenter calls him back to reality. The protagonist concentrates and replies that he became rich because he is a lucky investor. Suddenly the boy opens his eyes scared. Kong realizes that it was all a dream. What the boy doesn't understand is why that eagle he saw in the army still keeps appearing. All his dreams are ruined by it. At that moment Kong looks around realizing that he is still poor and unemployed living with his mother. The boy looks at the frame where he has a family photo and remembers that he has had good times. At that time his father was alive and had good business to support the family. Now he lives alone with his mother and accepts any part-time job to help her. Suddenly the protagonist leaves his thoughts when he receives a call. A little later Kong arrives at his friend's house, named Taekyu. The first thing the protagonist notices is that the guy continues with the collection of girls. He says that Taek really doesn't change. The friend disagrees and says that now he has a much more colorful collection. Kong replies that he can't even know since the guy has had these things since high school. Taek laughs and asks how life is going. The protagonist tells that he has recently become unemployed, but he is confident that things can change because he has a prestigious university degree, so he thinks that maybe he can give private lessons and make things a little easier for his mother. The two toast with the can of soda. The protagonist also decides to thank his friend for last Christmas spending time with his mother, since he couldn't stay. Taek replies that he didn't have any problems because he considers Kang's mother also his mother. The friend then asks how was his time in the army. Kong prefers not to talk about it. Taek then says that there is something he really needs to tell him. The protagonist listens to the serious tone of the conversation and asks what happened. At that moment the friend reveals that he found the password to his Bantcoin account. Kong asks what it is. Taek questions if the guy really forgot. Bantcoin is the virtual currency he earned by selling his character from the game Lutnia. The protagonist finally remembers. He also remembers that at that time the coin rose to 50 million won. Taek even cried because he had lost the password and obviously all the money. The friend laughs and says that thank God he managed to find it while cleaning his room. He then asks how much Kong thinks the coin is currently worth. The protagonist has no idea. Taek replies that until yesterday it was costing $1,120. Kong starts doing the calculations in his head and converts the dollar amount to won, which is the currency of his country. The guy immediately has a shock. He realizes that even with the rate his friend has more than 1 million won. Taek raises his finger and gives even more shocking news. He says that 1 million won is only for 1 BNT. The protagonist doesn't seem to understand. The friend then explains in more detail that 1 million won is equivalent to just a single BNT coin. Kong stops for a moment and again does the calculations of all the coins that Taek has. He is soon surprised to realize that his friend has more than 13 billion won. Taek says it took him a while to believe it, but it's really true. Kong yells asking his friend to donate at least 100 million to him, since it won't make any difference in his wallet. This is the kind of thing I would do if I found out that my friend became a billionaire overnight. Taek replies that he can't give a penny because he put everything on the exchange platform. By his calculations the money will continue to rise. The protagonist calls him a petty idiot, then says that if he had known that he was going to give so much money, he would have taken the game more seriously. Suddenly a memory comes to his mind. Kong remembers that at that time he gave one of his characters to take to sell. He then asks for his share of the money since his friend took his character's money. While Take is shaken asks how much his part is. Kong stops for a moment thinking about how much he should receive. Suddenly his attention is drawn to the window. As soon as the protagonist looks, he sees that same eagle from his dreams, but now in real life. The boy starts to tremble and asks why this is happening again. The eagle starts to fly and invades the apartment. It is shrouded in a strong yellow light exuding its power, and as soon as it passes it leaves some words scrambled in the middle of the smoke, which eventually becomes clearer. It is at this moment that the protagonist deciphers what those messages are. Take realizes that his friend is a little lost and tries to bring him back to reality. Kong asks if he knows what the mountain hill is. The friend replies yes. Mountain hill is an exchange platform where his Bantcoin is kept. The protagonist looks at the words left by the eagle, where he states that the mountain hill will fail. He then worries about Take and asks if the guy is sure that this platform is safe, or if there is no danger of going bankrupt. Take does not understand the meaning of this sudden conversation and replies that he trusts the platform 100%. The protagonist feels as if he is going crazy. He even thinks that all this is a hallucination this eagle appears from his time in the army and always leaves some messages. Anyway, the boy decides not to risk it and yells at Take to take all the money he has on the platform. The guy is obviously taken by surprise and questions why he's asking for this so suddenly. Kong screams as he grabs his friend and begs him to take the money now. He promises to tell him why he's asking for it later. Take obeys and calls his sister. He asks the girl to take all the Bantcoin off the platform. Meanwhile, the protagonist realizes that the words left by the eagle have disappeared. In a way, he believes that he is not hallucinating because he ended up getting the name of the platform right. Suddenly his friend shouts that this is not possible and looks at his cell phone. He says that the platform mountain hill just went down. It seems that the server went down. The good news is that his sister managed to get the money out in time. Hearing this makes Kong believe even more that he can predict the future. At this moment, Take receives another news. It seems that the platform is back online, but this time all customer accounts are empty. People are commenting on the internet about the money disappearing from the platform without notice. Take approaches Kong and asks him to please be honest, since he promised that he would tell everything if he took the money from the platform. The protagonist thinks for a moment and decides to reveal the whole truth. He says that he has the ability to predict the future. A few minutes later, the scene changes to what happened a year ago, when Kong was still in the army. It was there that he saw that eagle for the first time. It appeared when the soldiers were doing ordinary training and testing some bombs. The protagonist called the attention of the other men and asked if they could see the size of this eagle, but the answer was not very good. They said there were no eagles. Then they asked the protagonist to focus on training. Kong looks where the animal went and finds the messages in the smoke, where it said that KM-188 was going to explode. He looks to the side and sees the soldiers equipping the next test. The name and number are the same as the messages. The protagonist realizes this and his eyes fill with horror. The test was carried out and the bomb exploded while still on the ground, injuring and eliminating several soldiers. The protagonist managed to throw himself on the ground in time and had little injury. The scene returns to the present moment and the friend is surprised to hear this whole story. He is happy that the protagonist survived. Kong recognizes that he was very lucky. Most of the soldiers had fatal injuries. After this happened, the doctor said that the accident caused some confusion in his memory. Take says that this doctor's answer is kind of vague, but anyway, the protagonist has already witnessed this phenomenon of seeing the future twice, and both times the information was true, so he doesn't think it's a coincidence. Take says that this looks more like a superpower. Kong is surprised and thinks a little about it. After all, superpower is something you only see in movies. In addition, he is impressed that his friend believed him at first. Take replies that he would believe it even if a cute anime character appeared in front of him. The protagonist says that it is better to go to the main subject. He wants to know where your money is. His share is 1,200,000 won. Take asks how he arrived at this amount. The protagonist explains that at that time he sold his low-level character, so of the 11 billion that Take received, his share is 1 billion. This is about 9% of the 13 billion won that Take has now. The protagonist threatens to burn all those cute dolls if the guy doesn't deliver his share. Take tells his friend not to threaten him. In addition, there is no way to get the money out now. Kong replies that he understands that he must be planning to create a tax haven or something. Take is surprised and asks how he knows. The protagonist asks if the guy forgot that he is an economics student. Take says that his sister said that if the income tax is generated from Bitcoin, he will have to pay billions. That's why he created a tax haven in a place called Ilhadella. His company is called OTK Company. The protagonist asks if OTK is the abbreviation of otaku. The guy shouts saying that he has nothing to do with it. In fact it is the abbreviation of his name and surname, Otake. Then the boy celebrates by saying that as soon as he redeems the money, all that's left is to live a life of tranquility forever. The protagonist looks silly and asks if he hasn't been doing it all the time, trading the game items. The friend is outraged and tries to refute this accusation by saying that it's not that easy to make money selling the items. Kong accepts this answer and only asks his friend to pay what he owes. Take gives a reassuring smile and promises that he will pay as soon as he manages to transfer the money. The protagonist also gives the same smile. It was thanks to a prediction that the protagonist was able to receive an amount that he never even thought he would have. Next day, he goes to a bank to redeem the money transferred by his friend. Arriving there, the protagonist received a deposit of 500 million won. Take revealed that he had no way to send all the money now, but then he would find a way to get the remaining 740 million with his sister, since she is the one behind the rescue of the money. Then he asked the protagonist to be patient. Kong replied that there was no problem. At this moment he keeps the money he received from the bank, and the first thing he thinks about doing is to help his mother stop working for a while, and buy new clothes for her. Then the boy enters the mall and sees a line of people gathered near the bathroom. Kong approaches realizing that it is an argument. A female voice says that she is going to make a complaint on the store's website, but first he wants the woman to kneel down and apologize. After all, she doesn't even know how much these shoes cost. The manager lowers his head and apologizes to the rich woman in front of him. Then he turns his face to the lady who is being humiliated, and tells her to kneel now, just as the madam ordered. The protagonist's face is incredulous when he realizes that the person being humiliated is his mother. At that moment the blonde who makes the scandal tells her to kneel or else she must pay for her shoes. The manager asks the protagonist's mother if she will obey or prefer to be fired. Kong observes how her mother is dressed and remembers that she always said that she worked in the call center of the department store. The lady knows that she cannot lose her job and begins to kneel, but before that happens the protagonist pulls her by the arms. She looks back and sees her son. Kong questions what happened for the woman to demand that someone kneel. The mother turned her face embarrassed. The snobbish blonde gets annoyed and asks who he is to meddle in this matter. Kong replies that he is her son. The mother quickly interrupts him and says that she does not know the protagonist. Obviously, she does not want her son to be harmed. But the protagonist asks if she is ashamed of him. Then she says that she is not ashamed of who her mother is. The snobbish woman is surprised to discover that the boy is the son of the cleaning lady. The protagonist then asks again what happened. The blonde replies that her mother's mop ended up touching her shoe. The people who are watching the commotion look surprised at the blonde woman. There is someone even recording this situation. Kong does not believe that this is the reason she is using to humiliate her mother. The snobbish woman is annoyed for not having her reason taken seriously. She then asks if the boy knows how much his shoe costs and says that the value is 600,000 won. The protagonist can't stand this noise in his ear anymore and takes 600,000 out of his pocket, then gives it to the woman. Kong demands that she apologize to her mother and take the money away, or keep her precious shoes and leave empty-handed. Suddenly someone shouts that the woman is being filmed and thinks that she better accept the money. Kong asks if she prefers him to throw it down. The snobbish woman thinks for a moment and decides to accept the money. She says she is sorry without any emotion and turns to leave with the money in hand. The protagonist then calls the manager and orders him to be sure to get these shoes. The woman doesn't understand what he's talking about. Kong explains that he paid 600,000 for these shoes, so he'd better get them tomorrow or he'll report the store for theft. The manager quickly says he'll make sure to leave everything the way he asked. Kong calls his mother to leave. The snobbish woman says that the protagonist won't even wear the shoes, so he's just being stingy. Kong agrees that he won't use them and adds that he'll throw them in the trash tomorrow, then calls the woman old and thanks her for reminding him. The woman screams annoyed at being called old, then continues to make a scandal in the store. People look on without understanding this whole show. Meanwhile, the protagonist and his mother are outside the mall. The woman tells her son that if she goes back there she can still fix everything, but Kong asks why she is accepting to be treated like this. He promises that this will never happen again and hugs her. The woman is still very shaken by the humiliation she went through, but her son says he will protect her. The mother gives a satisfied smile and says that he has really grown up. A little later, the two sit down to have a meal at the popular restaurant. The protagonist has already told everything about Bantcoin to mother. The woman was surprised that there is something that makes so much money. Kong says that she no longer has to worry about paying for his college because now he has money, but the mother says that her college money has been saved for a long time, so he better focus on going to college. The son replies that they can solve it later, first he wants to use the money to buy a new home. Kong says that he is sure that his mother's coughs are due to that small house. The woman tries to say that she doesn't have to worry, but the protagonist asks her to just accept what he is doing to improve her health. The mother then sighs and says that he is just like his father. Suddenly the conversation is interrupted by a call from Take. The protagonist answers and the boy on the other end of the line starts shouting that an emergency has happened. He asks, "What happened?" Take shouts that his sister is back in Korea. A few hours later the scene changes to the Namsan Shilin Hotel. Passers-by point to something on the track and start laughing. At that moment we see that the protagonist is with his friend in a very funny car, an otaku car. Kong can't hide that he is very embarrassed, but Take looks very happy. After that they enter the hotel and Take asks why the protagonist wanted to be left on the street. This is a very obvious question for the boy. He says he didn't want to participate in his nerdy world. Suddenly a voice catches their attention. The girl complains that they were 3 minutes late. This is Take's sister. Her name is Hyunju. The girl is surprised that the protagonist also went to pick her up. Kong addresses her affectionately as Mana. They decide to sit together to talk a little about how was this time they were away. Hyun asks how was the time in the army. Kong replies that he was discharged a short time ago. She then suggests that they work together at Golden Gate when he graduates. The protagonist says that it is only the company accepts that he will go. Hyun gets serious and he asks what happened. She talks about the platform Mountain Hill and asks her brother if he really went bankrupt. Take replies yes, but he managed to get all the money out in time. The sister looks surprised. Take says he put everything in the account of the ODK company, more than $10 million. Hyun sighs in relief and hands over a letter. She says that this is the contact information of the manager of the Golden Gate branch in Gangnam, in case he needs to transfer a large amount of money to a household account. This is the contact of the person who can take care of it. Hyun adds that it is enough to mention that it is his younger brother. Kong analyzes the information. The sister then asks why Take sold everything at once, since at first he said he was going to sell it little by little. The brother couldn't deliver that the protagonist saw the future, so he replied that he only felt like it. Kong asks if she came to see Take, but Hyun denies it. She says that she came to solve something from the company she works for and will stay here for 10 days. Take asks if she is really going to stay 10 days. Hyun gets angry and asks if he has a problem with that. Take tries to answer that he is not and asks where she is going to stay. The girl replies that in this hotel. Take is surprised because the place is very expensive. Hyun says that the whole team will be staying together. She doesn't worry because it's the company that is paying. The protagonist remembers that to stay just one night at the hotel you have to pay 500,000 won, but he believes that this is not a problem for a billionaire company. At that moment Hyun receives a call and moves away a little. Take soon asks Kong if he is scared by his sister's personality. The protagonist blames his friend for it. Hyun comes back and says that the call was about the OPEC meeting calendar. Take doesn't seem to know what it is, but soon remembers that OPEC is the abbreviation for Organization of Oil Exporting Countries. The protagonist carefully observes the conversation and asks if they are a group of oil-producing countries. Hyun confirms that this is exactly it. To be more precise, it is the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. The girl keeps saying that the results of the OPEC meeting will be announced the day after tomorrow. Suddenly Kang's attention is attracted by a light. He again sees that eagle. It passes by and leaves another prediction of the future. This time the protagonist sees that OPEC will make a production cut agreement. Hyun quickly calls him and asks if everything is okay. Kong apologizes and says that he is only thinking a little. He then goes straight and asks Hyun what is the chance of OPEC making a production cut. Take is surprised by this question. Kong explains that the USA is indeed a producing country, but the amount produced is still far from domestic demand. This means that even though it is an oil-producing country, it has maintained the position of the largest importer. However, recently the United States has started to develop shale oil. The biggest disadvantage of this oil is that its production is expensive. The cost of production is estimated at about $45 per barrel, so if the price of oil falls below $50 per barrel, The forecast is that more than half of the companies that depend on it will go bankrupt. Hyun drinks his tea quietly and says that they are already aware of this matter. That's why OPEC member countries hastily held several meetings to discuss production cuts. But the interests of oil-producing countries always ended in failure. So she thinks that the meeting will not reach any agreement. The protagonist asks what will happen if they reach an agreement. Hyun replies that the price of oil will skyrocket and the market will be happy, but the probability of this is extremely low. Kang asks if she believes or not that they will reach an agreement. Hyun questions why he is insisting on it. The protagonist realizes that he talked too much and tries to reverse the situation, saying that he just thought too much. Hyun laughs and says that if they reached an agreement it would be good. A little later the protagonist returns home and takes Nerdy car. He thinks a little about the prediction he saw. If the OPEC production deal really works out, the price of oil will skyrocket. Kang realizes that if he buys oil in advance, he can generate a significant profit. The boy remembers that his previous predictions were right, so this one can also okay. The problem is how much money he can invest. Kang just signed a lease and plans to give about 100 million won to his mother, so the money he can use now is 275 million won, but he still has 740 million in Take's account. At that moment the guy asks the protagonist if it happened again. Kang replies that he really has a sharp perception. His friend laughs and says that he is curious to know what he saw. The protagonist quickly has an idea and realizes that he forgot to talk to Take about his strategy. After a few minutes Take watches the plan carefully. He asks if the goal now is to buy in advance so that when the oil goes up, they can make a lot of profit. Kang confirms that this is exactly what he is thinking. Take looks a little confused and asks how they are going to stack all the oil barrels. The protagonist slaps him on the head and tells the guy to pay attention to the traffic. A little later that day, they meet in front of the computer. Kang says that according to Hyun, the WTI company can barely keep around $60 per barrel. Take is shocked by this information because he even heard what his sister said, but couldn't understand anything. The protagonist then decides to explain it in detail to his friend. He speaks that crude oil is not only used to fuel cars, it is also used in various sectors such as industry. This means that an increase in oil prices has a significant impact on producer prices. Take understands and says that he will send 500 million won to him. There are $11 million left in his account. About $673,000 is from Kang. After passing on all the information he says he is ready to buy. The protagonist instructs him to buy it on the New York Mercantile Exchange. He says he will invest $300,000 for now. Take replies that he will also buy. Kang asks how much and the guy replies 10 million. He is surprised by a high amount and asks if it's 10 million won, but Take says it's $10 million. Kang asks if he's crazy to buy all this. The friend lowers the amount and asks if 5 million is good. The protagonist looks a little uncomfortable. The friend then reminds him of the prediction. Kang replies that it seems that Take believes much more in the prediction than he does. The friend makes the last bid and says he will buy 3 million. He states that he will not buy less than that. Kang finally agrees. He thinks again about the prediction and tells himself that if he is wrong he will accept the loss and then sell his share. His only concern is to ruin the 3 million Take, but he knows that his friend will not give up this amount, so he has no other choice. Without thinking twice the protagonist takes out his cell phone and buys the shares. It was so fast that Take couldn't even follow it with his eyes. He asks if everything went well and Kang answers in the affirmative. The friend answers what will happen from now on. The protagonist says that they just need to watch the OPEC meeting end. The next day the protagonist moved with his mother to the new house. He closed a rental contract for about 120 million won. The house is a little old, but everything is clean and the floors have been changed recently. The mother says she loved the house. It has 2 bedrooms and the sunlight comes in well. Kang is happy to hear this. He believes that he could have bought a better place if he hadn't invested in the prediction. Anyway, it's very good that his mother liked it. Suddenly the protagonist notices the woman hesitating to touch one of the boxes. He remembers that when his father passed away, his mother donated some of his belongings, but there is something that she would never have the courage to throw away, the photos of her father. At that moment the woman looks at one of the paintings where the family is gathered. Kang remembers that her mother's old dream was to have a house. Her father managed to buy a plot of land and made that dream come true. That was their first home, where Kang was born and raised, so he understands that sometimes the mother can get a little sentimental. After all, most of the family's memories are there. At this point Kang asks if she thinks about her father often. The mother replies yes. She thinks that if her husband hadn't worked so hard he would be alive to this day, so he could be moving with them. Kang observes the painting, the woman starts crying, then she wipes her tears and says she still has some things to take, then tells her son to bring all the things from his room. The protagonist agrees. After some time, Kang does a review and says that there are a lot of things they need to buy new, such as a washing machine, refrigerator, dining table. He approaches his mother and says that she needs to take a break from work. But the woman is against it and says that she is healthy. The protagonist asks her to take at least 3 months off. Her son's insistence manages to convince her. At that moment, Kang hands over an envelope and says that he put about 100 million won in this account, so he can spend it on whatever he wants. The woman is surprised by the amount of money, and the next moment she starts hitting the boy. She asks if he is out there distributing money to anyone. After being beaten, Kang replies that his mother is not just anyone. The woman obviously worries that her son is spending too much money on her, then says that he has his own savings. She suggests that the boy save the money and use it to buy a house in the future, or even save it for his wedding. Kang insists that his mother accept it or at least see it, as if he was leaving it with her for now. The woman accepts and says that he is as stubborn as his father. The protagonist remembers how much he still has in his private account and believes that he will not need to do anything else for the next 20 years. A little later that day, the doorbell rings and Take enters. The protagonist's mother goes towards him and asks how boy is. As we can see, Take has his hands very full. He hands 2 bags of toilet paper rolls to the protagonist and asks him to consider this a gift for his new home. Kang looks incredulous and asks if the guy really had the courage to give this here as a gift, when it's full of money in his wallet. Take thinks his gift is good and asks what he should have brought then. Kang gives a smile and says he would accept something simple, like a refrigerator, a washing machine or a TV. Take yells at the woman that her son is trying to extort him. Minutes later, the two sit on the floor of the protagonist's empty room and eat some apple. Kang asks if he is aware that the Mountain Hill really went bankrupt. Take says that it is only talked about on the internet. The Mountain Hill was the largest cryptocurrency exchange in the world. The damage is estimated between billions and even a trillion won. Normally the platform was supposed to compensate for the damages, but the value exceeded what was expected. Finally, the Mountain Hill preferred to declare bankruptcy. The protagonist soon asks what will happen to the people who were harmed. Take said that he believes that there will be no way to recover the Bantcoins. This means that those who did not withdraw the money in time ended up losing everything. If this bankruptcy had happened in some bank, probably the government would have reimbursed all the people, but the Mountain Hill is a cryptocurrency platform, so it is almost impossible for the government to interfere. The friend comments that it is amazing that the protagonist predicted the bankruptcy in time. Kang replies that it was just a coincidence. Take gets serious and says that nothing in life is by chance. Kang asks if he has any guesses. The friend then starts screaming that he has a superpower that he awakened in the moment of crisis. Kang yells at the guy to speak softly and asks if he went crazy. Take claps his hands and says that this is how superheroes are born. The protagonist has already gotten lost in the conversation. Take says that he has discovered his power. From now on he will call it the Eye of the Oracle. Kang replies that he doesn't like that name and reminds that they need to worry about something really important, the OPEC meeting. Take remains lost in his thoughts and says that Eye of the Oracle looks really good. Kang asks if he is talking to himself. He says that he may even consider this nickname if the prediction about the OPEC meeting is correct, but if it fails it is good to remember that they will lose money. Take is confident in his prediction and makes it clear that he will call it the Eye of the Oracle if everything goes well. The protagonist sighs heavily. The next day Kang goes to Take's house and asks what his sister said about the meeting. As we can see, the friend is focused on the game and with various foods around. He replies that Hyun said he will only know tomorrow. The protagonist gets anxious and thinks that his prediction failed. He starts to sweat cold, remembering that the stock prices have fallen another 3%. He and Take have already lost 100 million won. Kang fears that the worst will happen. The friend quickly reassures him, saying that he trusts his prediction, then invites him to play a game. Anyway, they will only know the answer tomorrow. Kang is happy with Take's positive way and asks which game they will play. The boy replies that his name is dating. The protagonist picks up the console, but he can't get it out of his head that if he continues to lose money, he will end up bankrupt in the very near future. At this point, the dating game presents 2 options for the player to choose to answer. The protagonist ends up selecting the option he would rather go out with his ex-girlfriend. Take asks what he's doing and tries to get the console back. Meanwhile, Kang continues with his thoughts that everything will go wrong and he will end up poor. having to teach and never finishing university. The two stay trying to see who will get the console until the protagonist shouts that the OPEC result is out. Take is scared by the expected information. Kong takes out his cell phone and accesses the website Quick News. The new information says that the countries have reached consensus for the first time. The second news reports that international oil prices have risen after OPEC's decision to cut production. The protagonist realizes that things are happening as predicted. Now for everything to work out he needs to know how much the WTI company is selling, since it was there that he bought the shares. Kong quickly accessed his account and was surprised by the price of a barrel of oil. It is costing $73. It increased by more than 20% in a few minutes. The protagonist immediately asks his friend to check his account. Takes out his cell phone. Kong says that for now everything is going according to plan, but all he predicted was only the production cut, and not how much they will receive. Lies in bed while accessing the account. The protagonist gets anxious and asks all the time how much they received. Suddenly the guy shouts that he made $630,000. He tries to convert to Korean won. Kong is faster and says that this is worth 700 million won. At the end of the day the protagonist needed to receive 740 million but counting on the investment, now he will receive 800 million won. At that moment the friend says that he really should have invested $10 million. Kong replies that it is easy to say when it has already worked, but reminds him that he trusted the predictions from the beginning. The friend strikes a pose while saying that he has no reason to be afraid anymore. There are already 3 correct predictions. This means that his ability is real. Kong starts to think about it and asks if he really sees him as those cartoon superheroes. The friend confirms. He says that normally when people think of superpowers, think about flying or destroying buildings with their fists. The difference is that this power can be replaced if you have an airplane or a bulldozer. However, the power to predict the future is irreplaceable. Even now with the advancement of computers and AI, it is still impossible to see the future. Believes that the protagonist can do very well if he can predict disasters or even sports scores. The protagonist covers his eyes as the energy emerges. He says he doesn't know exactly how it happened. Assumes it was in that accident in the army. Maybe he awakened the power because of it. Kong says he doesn't understand why the power only came to reveal itself now then. He says that if he had this vision at that time, he would have run away to a casino and get rich playing those games, but at the time of the accident, the prediction only appeared once and never again, so he thought it was an illusion in his head. At that moment remembers something. He says that Kang's prediction came from when he told about Bantcoin and the OPEC meeting, then suggests that the prediction is only related to finances. The protagonist replies that it is not a bad theory, but in this case the explosion in the army is out of the script. The friend replies that this prediction was probably an exception because it caused risk to his life. Suddenly seems to have an idea and he desperately asks what happened after the explosion. The protagonist doesn't understand why this now. The friend quickly explains that if his prediction is only related to finance, maybe that explosion was not accidental. Probably this case is related to corruption in military procurement. Runs to the computer saying that there is a chance that the KM-188 bomb was already defective from the beginning. Kong says that maybe his friend isn't entirely wrong, but if he thinks about it, all disasters caused by man are directly or indirectly related to finances. Soon says that he has a great idea. Kong replies that he is afraid when he says something like that, but decides to listen to him. Suggests that they form a duo. He will provide the money and Kong will provide the superpower, then they will be able to invest together and then share the profits. The protagonist thinks it's a great idea, but asks what will happen if they lose money in the middle. Replies that they won't be able to do anything, just keep investing. Kong doesn't know if this type of contract is fair since his friend would bear all the losses alone. He then tells that he would love to do that, but there is a big problem in this plan. He can't guarantee that what he sees is 100% accurate. If the prediction is wrong they can lose millions. Kong keeps talking while his friend can't stand to hear this same story anymore. Is almost covering his ears. He says that the boy needs to be more positive. In the end his 3 predictions were right. If they don't take advantage of this ability now, then yes they can lose money. Then takes his hand in his direction and invites him to dive together into the world of investors. The protagonist looks at his friend with a silly face and asks what will happen if he doesn't accept. Replies that the friendship would end. Kong says it looks a bit shallow. The guy continues with his hand raised and asks him to play. The protagonist feels pressured, but he is soon saved by a call on his phone from a person named Min. The boy answers and the person on the other end of the line invites him to have a drink in Hongdae, adding that Kihung is also going. The protagonist sees this as an opportunity to escape. He immediately agrees to meet with his friends from the university, then says goodbye to Take, saying that they will continue this conversation later. The friend tries to stop him, but it is in vain. An hour passes and the protagonist arrives at the Coma bar. He enters and soon sees his friends. Min calls him Sergeant Kong, but he says that he has already been discharged, then asks who all these people are. The veteran replies that the girls are freshmen who entered university this year. The one with black hair introduces herself as Huang Jaihai, the blonde introduces herself as Shin Yuri. The protagonist greeted the two and then asked where Kihung was. Min pours some drink and replies that Kihung will be a little late. Kong starts drinking. The friend asks if he won't go back to university. The protagonist thinks about it. Now that the problems of home and tuition are solved, he thinks it's a good time to go back to school. At that moment Yuri asks to serve more drink and he accepts. The girl also drinks and thinks it's a little strong. Kong replies that 3 bottles of soju are no problem for him. Suddenly someone else enters the scene. Min greets Kihung and he approaches the table. The guy comments that he hasn't seen the protagonist for a long time and asks how he is in the military. Kong replies that he left a while ago. The friend says that he should have warned him. The protagonist justifies that he thought he was looking for a job, so he preferred not to get in the way. Kihung replies that he was really busy, now he works in the financial sector, but he is going through problems. The guy starts talking that the commercial bank is fine, but next year the new investment bank hires will be smaller. They are currently thinking about creating a big investment bank. Many employees are complaining. The protagonist is shocked and asks if the friend is not safe as a new hire. Kihung replies that actually not, even new hires are being instructed to resign voluntarily, so it's a difficult decision. Kong asks worried what will happen if he is fired. Kihung replies that he plans to invest in private capital, then live off this income. It's something he's always been interested in. The veteran next door says he thought everything would be fine when Kihung got a job, but that doesn't seem to be the case. After a few hours the group has already drunk several bottles of alcohol. Kihung continues to complain about the work, saying that there are great entrepreneurs, but there are no great investors in his country. The protagonist just observes. Kihung says that maybe a genius investor will appear to save them from this disaster. At that moment Yuri receives a call and confirms to the person on the other end of the line that he is at the Coma bar. The veteran asks who it is and she replies that it is Siona. Yuri says that he told his friend that he was going to drink with the veterans and she said she would come too. The protagonist gives a frightened scream asking why she invited Siona. Yuri asks confused why he shouldn't call her. Suddenly the door of the bar opens and a beautiful girl with gray hair enters. The protagonist looks angry and recognizes that it is Siona. The girl looks at him surprised as if she did not expect it meeting him here. This was their first meeting since they ended their relationship. A few minutes later the scene changes to the two alone in a cafe. They preferred to leave the group so as not to cause any discomfort. Siona says that it has been 2 years and asks how he did in the army. The protagonist replies without much emotion that he did very well. He then asks how her relationship with Hyung is. The girl quickly replies that she is fine. Kong and Siona had a relationship during the university time, but he went to the army and the girl ended up falling in love with someone else. At that time Siona ended up hanging out with a senior who visited the university briefly during the festival. This guy is Jun Hyung, the third son of the owner of the GH company. Kong found out about the new relationship while still in the army. When Min decided to tell him, the protagonist remembers that he felt very sad because he liked the girl very much. At that moment, he tells Siona that she has changed a lot. The girl agrees and in the next moment apologizes for breaking up. When he was going through a difficult time, Kong replies without emotion that it's all in the past now. Siona sadly says that she really liked him. Kong almost chokes listening to this. The girl keeps saying that since she saw him for the first time, she felt that he was different from the others. That's why she loved and trusted him 100%. The protagonist asks why she broke up then since she had that feeling. Siona reveals that she couldn't miss the opportunity. Kong asks if the opportunity was to date a rich guy. The girl replies that she won't try to defend herself from it because in the end she was the one who broke up first, but she did it because she wanted to make her dream come true. Kong asks what that dream was. The girl takes a deep breath and gets up to leave. The protagonist yells at her to wait and tries to hold her. He asks what the dream is. She looks back and replies that it is success. The protagonist sits alone at a table and thinks about the latest events. 2 years ago his family lost their house before holding his father's funeral, relatives turned their backs, and in the middle of all this Siona decided to end the relationship. Kong felt that everything was falling apart in his head, and he couldn't do anything. This was the reason that encouraged him to join the army. His mother had no support and had to take on difficult jobs to survive. At this moment the protagonist mentally thanks his friend Take. After all, it was thanks to him that he earned 1 billion won. He laughs remembering that his ex talked about being successful. It seems that he knows well what that means. Suddenly the eagle appears and the protagonist, who is already out of his mind, offers a drink, then asks what it will show this time. The boy then sees the forecast and raises the glass of drink, saying that this is his future. At the end of the night the protagonist broke into Take's house and tried to wake him up. The friend smells the alcohol from afar and asks Kong to go home to rest. The protagonist keeps pulling his arm and keeps repeating the word success. The next day Kong finally wakes up. He realizes that he is at Take's house and feels a strong headache. The friend as always is playing and warns the protagonist that he ordered a hamburger for his hangover. Kong asks if he has never heard of soup, then takes the hamburger. Take asks if anything happened last night. The boy thinks for a moment and soon remembers the eagle. He gives a smile and says he doesn't remember anything. The friend starts shaking his shoulders while asking if Kong has already decided on yesterday's plan. The protagonist decides to solve this matter soon and asks if he has ever invested in his life. Take replies no, he just withdrew the Bantcoin. It seems that the protagonist doesn't know that much about investments either. In fact, he has tried to invest a few times, but failed in all of them and didn't even have a return. The friend then asks if he didn't study administration. Kong says it only lasted a year and barely remembers what he saw. Take says that he currently has $1 million in the account, which is equivalent to 13 billion won. The protagonist knows that it is an amount that normal people will never see in their lives, so he feels lost about what to do with so much money. What is not lacking is capital to invest. Take could easily live a quiet life with all the money he has now. The protagonist's concern is always the same, investing money and ending up losing. But as we can see, the friend is dying to invest. Kong asks why he wants to invest the 13 billion won. Take replies that the more the better. The boy throws the roll of the hamburger back and says that they can have fun doing it. The protagonist, being a much more cautious guy, says that it's fun when you're making money, it stops being fun when you start losing. Anyway, the boy feels that he is not yet ready to have this partnership. He remembers all the predictions he made previously and wonders if he could really predict the future when it comes to financial issues. Just as Take said, he comes to the conclusion that he first needs more information. The protagonist has spent the last few days checking out large cap stocks listed on the stock exchange. In addition, he also tried to understand about the price of stocks, oil price, gold and exchange rates. He was a lot of time dedicated not to make any mistakes. Kong was lucky because currently the government requires banks to disclose important information. Thanks to this, it is now possible to see the good and more news about the company, but obviously they will not release any information that could harm their business so much. This means that the information is not of that much value. The protagonist comes to the conclusion that he needs more privileged information, such as the mountain hill or OPEC. Take advises him to be more patient. In addition, he comments that it would be better to sign the contract. The protagonist is confused about what he is talking about. Take says that his sister always says that to make any partnership it is good to have a contract. Kong goes to him and signs the contract, then said he was going to get a coffee. Take replies that there is no coffee at home. Suddenly the protagonist's phone rings and the number is unknown. The boy answers. The person on the other end of the line identifies himself as Yuri. Kong repeats this name a few times and finally remembers the blonde girl at the bar, then replies that she can talk. At this moment Yuri shyly asks if he is free and invites him to have a coffee. A few minutes later the protagonist arrives at a nearby cafe. He enters and Yuri quickly waves. The girl thanks him for coming even though she called from nowhere. The protagonist replies that it's okay because he was at a friend's house nearby. Yuri is a little embarrassed and asks why the boy is looking that way. Kong replies that she is very similar to the member of a girl group he saw in the army. Yuri asks if this girl was beautiful. The protagonist gets shy and decides to change the subject. He asks if she is from here. The girl replies that she came from Cheongdam. This information takes the protagonist by surprise and he believes that the girl is very rich. After all, it's hard to believe that a freshman from Cheongdam came to live here. Kong decided to understand why she called here. Yuri replies that he actually wanted to apologize for what happened to Siona. The girl lowers her head several times and says that she has never been to a meeting with veterans, so he didn't know how to behave. The protagonist replied that he didn't need to worry so much because it wasn't her fault. Yuri asks if he's planning to come back next semester and he replies yes. She says that if that happens they will be in the same class as the second year. At that moment Yuri remembers something and says he has a favor to ask for. Kong looks curiously as the girl turns her face in shame. This reaction awakens an idea in the protagonist, and he soon believes that the girl plans to confess. The boy thinks for a moment if he should refuse, but mentally says that she is too beautiful to receive a no. At this moment Yuri breaks his expectations by asking him to go with her to change her cell phone. The girl explains the sudden proposal by saying that she believes she will be deceived if she goes alone. The protagonist is incredulous and stutters when answering. He almost planned the wedding and the children. Kong is embarrassed to have imagined that the girl would confess. He quickly replies that he is not very good with electronics. Yuri replies that he does not need to make an effort and adds that he only needs your presence. The first thing the guy remembers is that Take is the best escort for this case. The otaku knows all the releases and is always on top of the prices. The scene changes for the two entering an electronics store. Yuri tells the salesman that he is looking for a Samsung Electronics L6. The attendant replies that this is the most popular model currently and asks to follow it. Yuri talks to the salesman while the protagonist decides to take a look at the cell phones. He finds the model that Yuri is thinking of buying and remembers that he used the L3 before going to the army, but now the most current model is the L6. Time really flies. Suddenly, Kong is surprised by yet another prediction. The message this time is that the L6 model will be discontinued. The protagonist looks intrigued when suddenly the girl touches his arm. He gets scared and retreats. She asks what happened. Kong replies that it was a mosquito. The boy is happy that he finally received another prediction. Yuri finally buys the cell phone and they leave the store. She says that she bought it by contract and will have to take very good care of it. The protagonist looks at the device and ends up letting slip that it will be discontinued soon. Yuri asks what he said. Kong realizes that he spoke his thoughts out loud and tries to reverse the situation by saying that it is just a joke. After that he starts running and waves to the girl, wishing her a good return home. She tries to say something but is left alone. The protagonist breaks into Take's house and the guy asks why all the noise. Kong quickly makes a summary of what happened and even shows the Samsung phone. Take seems not to believe that his friend had a prediction that the L6 model would be discontinued just by tapping on the cell phone. Kong says he doesn't know exactly how this will happen because Samsung Electronics launches a variety of smartphones, from budget to premium. In addition, the L series is Samsung's bestseller, but the protagonist also recalls that the smartphone market is currently dominated by NPL, so it is possible to say that the two brands are enemies. NPL launched a smartphone called Nphone. Sales and profit beat Samsung by a landslide, so they say that this L6 was made with the intention of competing with Nphone. Take finds this prediction strange because Samsung's L6 will hit the mark of 70 million units sold. Kong is also a little reluctant to believe and asks what could be the reason for it to have been discontinued. The friend suggests that it could be a patent dispute. Samsung Electronics is known worldwide and there are probably many enemies in different countries. A while ago the patent dispute with NPL became known as the process of the century. Kong begins to understand his friend's thinking and says that normally the company that loses the patent dispute has to pay for damages or licensing fees. This is the only reason they find to justify the stoppage of sales, but Take wonders how he will get to this. He believes that there is no way Samsung can lose because the brand has a huge amount of communication and technology patents. In the last dispute involving a patent with NPL, Samsung counterattacked using its communication patents. They were successful in this aspect. Thinking about all this, the boys come to the conclusion that they know nothing. The protagonist's last suggestion is that there may be a problem with the Samsung product itself. Take replies that it still doesn't make sense. When a device has a problem, the brand offers repair or compensates the customer. It's strange to stop the production of something that is successful. The two friends talk for a while longer and point out the points they believe, but nothing makes sense and they prefer to sleep because they can't stand the subject anymore. Suddenly in the middle of the night a scream is heard from Take's apartment. The protagonist gets up scared and asks what happened. The friend quickly replies that this thing exploded near his head. He says that he was playing on L6 when he got sleepy, so he put his cell phone to charge and slept, but out of nowhere the device exploded. At that moment the two approach the burned cell phone. Take asks what kind of cell phone explodes the first time it's charging. The protagonist replies that he doesn't know, but surely if he had known he would have warned him. The two look at each other after this comment when they suddenly notice a large bubble emerge from the cell phone. The next day, Take reveals that he has already done some research and there was an explosion accident before. After 3 days of the launch, a photo was sent to the community. The customer told that the device exploded while charging. Thanks to the quick response of Seosong Electronics, the case was covered up, but even so there were several similar reports on social networks. Take believes that the brand is trying to silence people with money. The protagonist asks what Seosong said about the explosion. The friend replies that they tried to justify it by saying that it was due to the external impact. But anyway, the accidents were not so common. There were small problems besides the explosions, but it didn't really affect sales. Kong asks if there was a problem in the manufacturing process. The friend replies that he believes not. Anyway, they got some information that can help them now. The protagonist agrees and says that in the other predictions they didn't have to think much. They just invested or took the money from some account, but now in this situation it is necessary to know the moment of discontinuation and its effects to understand how to invest, then suggests observing the situation for a few more days. The next day the boys received a visit from a Seosong engineer. He said he was going to warn about the cause of the explosion after an investigation, then tried to talk to the boys about the compensation in money. An important condition to receive compensation is not to publish any information about the explosion online, at least until the results of the investigation are released. The boys wait for the man to leave, and the protagonist says that the company does not seem surprised to find out that his phone exploded. Judging by the employee's reaction, they have probably seen this case repeated several times, much more than has been posted online. In addition, a device exploding can seriously injure a person. The protagonist believes that if this continues it is reason enough for L6 to be discontinued. Take says that the annual operating profit of Seosong Electronics exceeds 30 trillion won. Of this operating profit 40% comes from communication, which includes the smartphones. The protagonist asks if they will lose 40% of operating profit if L6 is discontinued. Take replies that not exactly. After all, Seosong have many previous models, but it will cause significant damage. The friend explains that if each phone costs 1 million won, then the refund amount alone would be 6 trillion won. Considering the expected profits, the losses would multiply several times. The protagonist understands his line of reasoning and says that the question now is how to invest. If the forecast was good it would just be to buy stock, but as it is bad the option is limited. Take asks if it is not for this type of situation that short selling is useful. The protagonist replies short selling itself is not difficult, it involves borrowing shares, selling them and buying them back cheaper to pay and make a profit. The question is the profit margin. Even if you sell a stock worth 100 million won and buy it back for 10 million won, the profit margin will be low. In addition, the protagonist thinks that no stock will fall that much. The drop would be 20 to 30% at most. Investing 13 billion won to earn 3 to 4 billion is a huge profit, but he believes that he can still find a way to make a higher profit. Take again reminds the protagonist of the college he went to in management, but the boy doesn't remember anything he learned there. He says he needs someone with more knowledge. The first person that comes to his mind is Hyun, however he wouldn't know how to explain it to her because he needs this information, not to mention that he sees the future. Take suggests that the boy just explain that he trusts his vision. Kong replies that he really underestimates his sister, but is reassured because he knows someone. The friend asks who the person is. Kong replies that it is Park Sang-yeep, former president of the Royal Investment Club. Some people call him a lunatic, and others call him a genius. In the world there are two types of geniuses, those who are brilliant in multiple areas and those who excel only in one. Sang-yeep belongs to the latter group. He grew up in Australia and as a child his grades at school were low. When he became an adult he became interested in the stock market. One day he found a company called QMK Tech and predicted a 10-fold increase in the stock price. So he quickly secured 5 million in shares. After that the company actually increased the stock price and Sang received 50 million won. When the protagonist entered the university the professor had already earned 300 million, but even so he felt that it was not enough. Sang continued studying and a stock that caught his attention was that of chemicals. He sold all his shares and started buying chemical options, but this investment didn't work out very well because the company just went bankrupt and he lost everything. Sang he had to borrow from loan sharks, and when the day came to pay he had to commit some illegal practices. After that, the man just disappeared from the map. The scene changes to a restaurant. The protagonist tells Sang that it was very difficult to find him. The man scratches his head in embarrassment and asks if Kong will pay for the food. The protagonist replies yes because the teacher always paid for him when he needed it. Then he introduces his friend to Sang. The man asks if Take is the friend who bought Bantcoin in high school. He soon starts to say that the boy could be rich if he had found the key to the account. Kong gives an embarrassed smile and mentally thanks his friend for finding that key. Then he asks how the teacher has been during this time. Sang replies that he is currently teaching math to students going to college. The man says that the low salary made him realize how valuable even a single 101 coin is. The protagonist remembers that Sang went from earning billions to being in debt overnight. It is a difficult reality to face. The teacher soon asks why the boy sought him out. Kong replies that he is seeking to better understand futures and options. Sang asks if he went through the process to open a futures and options account. The protagonist replies no, but in fact he has already created it through Take's OTK company. Sang explains that futures and options have a difference, then asks if the duo knows which one it is. Apparently the boys only know the name. The professor decides to explain in detail. He says that futures are contracts in which both parties agree to trade a specific quantity of a commodity at a price. The objective is to guarantee a fixed value without price increase or decrease. Whether you win or lose depends on the price on the date of the contract. Both parties are obliged to complete the payment despite the profit or loss. Kong takes his notebook and starts writing down everything he is hearing so as not to run the risk of forgetting. The teacher continues to say that on the other hand, in the case of options, you are selling a right to trade. The right to exercise the option belongs to the buyer. If the customer does not want to buy, he will choose the next one. Take then asks if in this case the seller is at an advantage. Sang replies that in the market the win rate is higher for the option seller. Take asks if the seller wins anyway. The teacher answers this question with an example, then says that the highest probability will always be on the seller's side. He asks Kong to do the calculations of a stock by paying 101 and making a profit of 9,000 times. The protagonist comes to the conclusion that he could earn 9 trillion won, but the professor brings him back to reality saying that he is right, but this result is dreaming too big. Anyway, it is good to know that when things like this happen, the price of put options skyrockets hundreds of times and the seller of the option has to pay this amount. Sang does not recommend playing with options, but asks where they want to go with it. The protagonist explains to the professor about Samsung Electronics. The man asks what can go wrong if the L6 series is doing so well. Kong says that smartphones are exploding. Sang asks if there is any more evidence that the line will really stop. The protagonist doesn't know how to answer this because he can't just justify that he had a vision. Sang again advises that it's not so reliable to deal with options. After all, that's how he lost everything. After a while, the boys say goodbye to the teacher. The protagonist tells his friend that he just heard that they could lose everything, then asks if he still wants to move on. Take confirms that he is ready and asks what he thinks. Kong gives a smile and says that it is time to try. The guys decided to believe 100% in the prediction, so they started to prepare for the two forms of investment. The first one is low risk and low return, and the second one is high risk and high return. Kong suggests buying 70% in options and the rest in short selling. Even if the rate of return drops, it is good to have a second option to avoid the worst-case scenario. The protagonist assumes that the price will drop by about 10%, counting on refunds it will drop to 20%. At this point, the friend calls his attention to say that another Samsung cell phone exploded. The new report happened in the USA and the international media began to be interested. Take asks where the boy intends to buy options and he replies that at HTS. HTS is the abbreviation for Home Trading System. It is a computer program that allows individual investors to trade stocks outside of stockbrokers. In the end, Take gave his 13 billion for the investment. He decided from the beginning that he would pay the amount alone and the protagonist would only lend his skill, but Kong didn't think it was fair to let him invest alone and put his 800 million available as well. They will depend on the stock to fall as predicted so that they can make money. After making the purchases, the two sit in front of the computer and wait. After 2 days, the Samsung share price rose by 8%, contrary to expectations. The short sale that only profits when the shares fall naturally registered a loss of 8%. Take stood in front of the television watching his money go away, visibly worried. Cell phones kept exploding around the world, but things seemed to be happening very slowly. The protagonist tries to convince himself that everything will work out in the end. The friend desperately asks if the discontinuation will be notified tomorrow. Kong replies that probably. The next day, the famous domestic media and foreign journalists filled the press conference room. The president of Samsung named Dong was forced to give an interview because the media kept reporting about the explosive phones. In short, the president blamed the explosion on the battery and promised adequate compensation to the affected customers. In addition, they announced a new launch and a better battery. Finally, the president ended by saying that he would have complete responsibility for 6 million units declared. Kong and Take were surprised. After all, they expected the company to discontinue manufacturing and not to pay the people affected. On that day, people filled social networks with diverse opinions, some defending the brand and others not. In the end, the company had to spend 6 trillion won to solve the problem, something that the protagonist did not calculate. There were still rumors that the company would not suffer such a big loss because the damaged phones would be refurbished and sold after the company had to spend a large amount of money. The stock that had been falling recovered and closed down only 1%. This means that the protagonist made a profit of 1%. Take celebrated that the shares were going back up, but Kong knew that they probably wouldn't recover everything he lost. This 1% was nothing compared to what has already gone. What made the protagonist sadder is that most of the loss was his friends. He puts his hand on his head and asks at what point he interpreted the wrong view, how things could not be working out. That night the protagonist couldn't sleep and kept thinking about the losses he had. He believed that he could spend it all if he used 1 billion won a year, but now that amount is gone in a few days. Little by little the thoughts were suffocating the boy. Suddenly Take gets out of bed and asks if everything is okay. He woke up to the noise of Kong moving. To calm him down, he decided to invite him to get a beer. The two went down to a nearby convenience store, and Kong couldn't stop thinking about the loss. He asked if his friend blamed him for what happened. After all, nothing would have happened if it wasn't for his prediction. Take says that his friend is not to blame and adds that he was the one who suggested investing in the first place. In addition, it may be that paying the damages does not solve the problem of Samsung. Protagonist thinks about his friend speaks and has an idea. The only thing that could harm Samsung was if the problem of the explosion was not in the battery. Anyway, he decides to stop blaming himself so much and say that he was wrong, especially because the answer will only come with time. A week passed after Samsung's announcement and the company started to pay all affected customers. While this was happening, they put other products on sale and more than 30,000 new units were sold in a single day. Obviously, it was a relief for the company and the new buyers were also satisfied. With that, the share price of Samsung Electronics rose again. Unfortunately, Kong and Take suffered a very large loss. Of the 13 billion won, only 3 billion are left. The protagonist knows that it would have been worse if he had bet all the money on the option, but fortunately he also put money in short sales. At that moment, Take goes to the window and starts shouting that the money is leaving. The protagonist just observes. He also lost a lot of money with it, about 600 million. According to the forecast, he has until the 7th for the discontinuation to be presented by the brand, so Kong can do nothing but wait. He also remembers the professor talking about how dangerous it is to put money in options. That's how he lost all the money and fell into debt. Take says he should have bet everything during the OPEC reduction meeting. He jumps on the bed and says that now it doesn't matter because he also lived well without that money. The scene changes to an airplane, where it is possible to hear the screams of the passengers. The co-pilot had to leave the cockpit to put out the fire caused by a Samsung cell phone. The owner of the device had serious injuries and was treated inside the plane. A burned paper appears identifying flight HEL 745, and with the date December 9th, suddenly Kong wakes up and realizes that everything was just a dream. He turns to the side and feels the same energy in his eyes as when he sees a forecast. Take approaches quickly and asks what happened. Kong holds his head while repeating the words 4 days from now. His friend doesn't understand what he's trying to say and asks what will happen in 4 days. The protagonist with a terrified expression replies that something will happen in 4 days that will cause L6 to be discontinued. Take picks up his cell phone looking for new information about the company. Meanwhile, Kong says that this prediction seemed different from all the others. Take finds new news about another case of explosion with the new product offered by the brand. The protagonist runs to the computer. The consumer posted a complaint saying that the cell phone caught fire after he connected the charger. To make matters worse is the new cell phone offered by Samsung with the new battery. The president of the brand gave a new interview and blamed it again on the external shock. The boys have more confidence in the company's bankruptcy. Take is anxious to get his Money back, the protagonist smiles and says that it didn't end until it actually ended. He remembers that in the first clarification the company blamed the battery, but then they changed the battery and the cell phone continues to have the same failures. The boy tries to understand what the cause of this is. Kong takes a deep breath and tells his friend that it's better to go back to sleep. They'll be watching the next 4 days to see how things are going. Exactly 4 days later, the prediction that the protagonist had with the plane came true. The newspapers commented again on the accidents with Seosung mobile phones. The passenger who was carrying the phone suffered burns on his thigh and fingers. After that, an emergency landing was made. This news soon reached the media around the world and on all airlines. Some airports designated L6 as a prohibited item for hand luggage and checked luggage. At 8 a.m., an emergency meeting was held at Seosung's headquarters. An hour after the company's shares began to fall by 10%. With each passing hour the drop increased and reached 13%. The protagonist and the friend were obviously following all this. Take says now is a great time to buy. The scene changes to the conference room of the Seosung Group headquarters. The shareholders greet Vice President Jin Yong. The president of relations named Dong starts the meeting saying that in the first investigation the problem was the battery and it was changed. One of the shareholders then asks what the problem is this time. The man replies that he doesn't know because it is still under investigation. Or Vice President Jin asks how long he thinks he needs to get the results. Dong replies that apparently a week is enough. Jin takes a deep breath and asks if the men are suggesting to take responsibility and cost once again. One of the shareholders replies that gaining time is the priority now. Jin believes that trying to fix things will not convince consumers. He starts to think of a solution, and the only method he finds is not so pleasant. The Seosung company was founded by his grandfather and then passed to his father. Jin took the position of vice and started to lead the whole group after his father got sick. Now he doesn't know exactly what attitude to take and wonders what his father would do. His attention is drawn to a decoration ship, and the boy remembers when he was a child. His grandfather presented the decoration as Theseus ship. The story it was about a ship that was preserved for 1,000 years. People started to change some parts so that it would continue to work, and in the end it was difficult to find the original parts of the ship. The grandfather explained that the same goes for a corporation. Over the years Seosung will release some electronics that will be replaced. This means that there will come a time when he will need to change and give up his old ideas. At that moment Vice President Jin remembers all the teachings of his grandfather and has an idea. He plucks up the courage and announces that he will discontinue L6. Jin's grandfather and founder of Seosung explained that the same goes for a corporation. Over the years Seosung will release some electronics that will be replaced. This means that there will come a time when he will need to change and give up his old ideas. At that moment Vice President Jin remembers all the teachings of his grandfather and has an idea. He plucks up the courage and announces that he will discontinue L6. All products sold will be refunded and consumers will be adequately compensated. The shareholders declared this as the worst choice, as the company would lose a lot of money and consequently they too. Even in the face of this, Jin remained firm and said that it didn't matter how much money was lost now. The important thing is to recover the image of Seosung. So the best alternative is to discontinue the line and regain the consumer's trust. Jin makes it clear that the decision is his as vice president of the company. Shareholders are silent and Dong says he will prepare an official announcement now. At 1 p.m. the announcement was made. Dong went public on behalf of the Seosung company to apologize to everyone who believed and loved L6, but the entire sale will be suspended thinking about the well-being of customers. In addition, consumers will also be refunded. The ad was spread all over the internet. The protagonist and his friend watched in surprise. After all, Kong had already accepted that his prediction had gone wrong, but now he wonders who decided to suspend the sale of L6, and what Seosung would gain by doing so. On the other hand, Take wonders how much the company will lose once L6 is suspended. In the end, this announcement was something that his friends wanted to happen. People on the street could hear the cries of happiness. After that, the company's announcement went viral and everyone could see the comments about the device. Some were not pleasant and even threatened the president of relations. Shareholders began to abandon Seosung. Even individual investors started to sell the company's shares. The press leaked that the expected loss due to the discontinuation of L6 is at least 50 trillion won. Seosung already went through a financial crisis in 2008, but today's one has surpassed all the crises the company has ever had. Later that day, Seosung's financial office investigated the recently sold shares of Seosung Electronics, but something catches their attention. Someone accumulated thousands of Samsung electronics before the incident occurred. One of the men says that it seems that this person knew what was going to happen. Everything was done by the Golden Gate. The guy in the white clothes wonders why someone would risk buying the shares by the Golden Gate, since this company also suffered considerable damage. What also seems strange to them is that the purchase was billionaire. Suddenly the man in the white clothes shouts that no one would risk such a high amount if they did not know that the L6 would be discontinued. He orders this purchase to be investigated. The guy in the suit rushes to comply with the orders. The analyst is left alone wondering who the person behind it is. At this moment the protagonist and his friend are following in real time the fall of stock prices. It was something that they hoped would happen. Every second these numbers changed and the boys sweated cold. At that moment they look at each other realizing that the number of losses does not stop increasing. This is great since they bet that the company would lose money. The loss percentage reaches such a high value that the boys start to jump in the room with so much happiness. Here is a small summary of what happened. Kong and Take bet billions that Samsung would suffer loss of profit. No one believed that this could happen because the company was very well stabilized. It was then that the friends took the opportunity to link the largest amount of money to Samsung's loss. Now the 13 billion that the friends invested increased to 685 billion, going from billionaires to multi-billionaires. The boys decided to stop and guarantee the money they already had. Then they closed the short sale and the final return on profits was 5,170%. Take couldn't even count all that money. He says he would have made more money if Samsung had discontinued L6 in the first explosion that happened. The protagonist replies that they would have made at least 1 trillion. At this point Take asks how much he owes Kong. The protagonist asks what he is talking about and the friend replies that they agreed to share the profits. In this case with the discounts, it is 336 billion for each. Kong wonders if this amount of money is enough to reach the height of a building. He doesn't even know how he was able to get out of a broke guy worried about the future. For someone who has 336 billion in his hands, Kong is happy that everything worked out because he ran the risk of Take losing everything he conquered too. A few days ago the poor boy was the only one to see his billions go away. So the protagonist doesn't think it's fair to keep half of the money, since Take put most of it, but the friend replies that Kong deserves it because it was thanks to him that the 13 billion were turned into 685 billion. The partnership consists of Kong providing the information and Take providing the capital. The protagonist is happy to see that his friend did not hesitate to share 50% of the profits. This is the true meaning of friendship for him. But now Kong thinks again about why his predictions are related to money. The boy fears predicting something that is out of his control, such as natural destruction. Take interrupts his bad thoughts and says that it is better to keep secret what they did. The protagonist agrees and knows that his friend would never open his mouth. Take confesses that he is afraid that someone will find out about this and be dragged into intelligence agencies. It seems that it is something that the boys will have to worry about from now on. But Take quickly forgets about it and celebrates the billions they have earned. Kong still has a small concern about the company's financial crisis. He imagines that Samsung will take time to stabilize again. Now the stock prices of the American company NPL and the Chinese company Yahello have risen. Take tries to calm his friend by saying that they did nothing to cause the discontinuation of L6. They just took advantage of the fact that it would already be discontinued to make money. The protagonist agrees that they did nothing wrong, but still feels bad for profiting from the loss of someone, especially when they were the only ones to make this profit. Take says that anyway they are now billionaires. The protagonist laughs and replies that the prediction helped by 50%. They would not have gotten this amount if they didn't have money to invest. The two celebrate the success of the plan. Now Take is eager to know how Kong intends to bring the money. Taxes will take at least 150 billion if you receive it in your account. The protagonist says that the worst thing is that he will have to prove how he got this money. Take questions if he intends to receive these 336 billion in physical money. Kong asks if he thinks he can withdraw this amount. The answer is no, and the protagonist begins to think that the most likely thing is to open a company in a tax haven too. Take thinks for a while about what to do with all that money. He thinks about reinvesting again, but Kong says that it will be increasingly difficult to multiply this amount. Just the money he has now is enough to live a whole life. Without investing again, it would still be a comfortable life. But the protagonist doesn't know if he will be satisfied for a long time if he just stops here. He also remembers the prediction he had when he met his ex. The protagonist preferred to hide this prediction from Take. At that moment he asks his friend to hold his hand. Take finds it suspicious and asks what it means. Kong says that if he touches his hand it means he will go with him until the end, but if Take doesn't agree, will have to continue alone. The friend seems a little afraid, but decides to follow the protagonist and touches his hand, demonstrating that he trusts him 100%. After that, the protagonist turned his attention to the money and found a simple solution. To bring it to Korea, now Kong has 50% of the OTK company, a company created by Take in a tax haven. This way the protagonist will not need to pay taxes in Korea. Kong explains how things will work and realizes that Take is not very focused. The friend decides to summarize this conversation and asks if the protagonist still has that contract that he gave. Kong replies that it is in his wallet. Take takes the contract in hand and reads it. In the next moment, he tears the paper in half, causing the protagonist to despair. Take says he thought it well and it is not worth dividing the amounts by 50% for each. Kong does not understand what his friend is doing. Take replies that they could split 8-2. The protagonist assumes by his friend's expression that he is not joking, but he does not understand why his profit has now been decreased to 20%. Maybe hundreds of billions is enough to change someone's character. The protagonist did not expect his friend to do something like this and is surprised when he is about to say that he will keep the 20%. At this point Take says that Kong can keep 80%, while he gets 20%. The protagonist expected it to be the other way around and starts asking if Take ate something spoiled today. The friend confirms that his sense is perfect. The protagonist replies that profits should be fair and divided equally. Take disagrees, saying that Kong deserves more because his predictions are more valuable. From now on he can make money alone with the capital he has. Take came to the conclusion that he would be dragged if they worked together from now on, so the biggest profit should be Kang's. The protagonist listens to all this with his mouth open. He had not realized that now his capital is enough to go alone. His main intention when he made money was to continue investing with Take, but thinking about it, it is really more advantageous to move this money as one, instead of dividing it in two and moving it separately. At this moment the protagonist asks scared if Take is thinking of giving up 30% of the shares. The friend replies yes, because he intends to multiply what is left in the future. In addition, you can also invest the money you have in OTK. The protagonist asks if he is sure and says that in the future his prediction may fail. Take replies that he doesn't care. He is willing to continue investing with his friend. Kong finally accepts the 80% and asks if he will now be in control of the company. Take says that it should not be a problem for him who did administration. The protagonist scratches his head with embarrassment and says that he only studied 1 year. Take touches his shoulder and replies that it doesn't matter because from now on he will be the CEO of the OTK company. Kong feels pressured to manage his friend's company, but he knows that Take trusts him a lot from the first predictions. In addition to being the first to see the situation more objectively, thinking about it, the protagonist agrees to take control of OTK. A few days pass and the boys realize that Christmas is coming. Take asks what he did last Christmas. Kong replies that he was probably shoveling snow, then asks what his friend did. Take says that he spent it with his mother. The protagonist remembers that his friend was the only one to visit his mother in the period that he spent in the army, but now the boy has returned and is determined to keep his own mother company. So he asks Take to transfer his share of 800 million won. The guy stops playing for a moment and asks how he is going to bring this money. The protagonist understands that he has to deal with taxes properly first, but before he needs to take care of the taxes of the 500 million he received before. At that moment Take starts to rummage through the room looking for the tax receipt he received from his sister. He finally finds it and gives it to Kong. The protagonist says he intends to use the money to buy some Christmas gifts, something he didn't do last year. The scene changes to a real estate agency. The attendant complains about not having done any sale in the last few days. Right now that he needs money. At that moment Kong passes through the door and is greeted by the attendant, who offers hot chocolate and he accepts. The woman assumes from the clothes that the protagonist is a college student looking for a dormitory. She intends to serve him in the best way even if the commission is small. So she starts talking about a small room that was recently created and the environment is comfortable. The protagonist explains that he is not actually looking for a room. He intends to buy a house. The attendant is shocked to hear that he wants to buy instead of renting. Kong repeats that he wants a house and goes to the window overlooking the properties. The woman explains that the price can vary between 300 million and reach 1 billion. It depends a lot on the location and size of the land. Kong opens the door and points to one of the houses, interested in knowing the price. The attendant says that this house would be approximately in the range of 500 to 600 million won. Kang replies that he understands and the woman is silent. Suddenly the boy says he liked it and will keep the house. She is surprised because she didn't think she would sell that house so fast. In addition, she can't understand where a young man would get so much money from. So the woman says she will look for other houses for him. But the protagonist says he wants that house specifically. The attendant replies that that house is not for sale. Kang asks if it is possible to convince the owner to sell if he pays more than the initial value of the property. She replies that it is possible, but she does not understand why a young man would buy a house for a much higher value than the market. At that moment Kang goes to the bag he brought with him and starts to move. He then takes out some money bills and asks the attendant if the market value is really 600 million. The woman looks scared at the amount of money he starts to take out of the bag. The protagonist puts the packages on the table and says that he is willing to pay 800 million for the house. Each package of money has at least 3 million won. Kang also offers extra money for the commission if the deal goes through. There is a story behind the house that the protagonist wants. The owner of the property is called Kim Mija. She was very happy to find the two-story house, but she did not expect that her dream would become a nightmare. As time went by, the family began to fight among themselves over the house. Her husband and children complained about the long commute to school. Over time the house got old, repairs were expensive and the family could not afford it. After that Mija's desire became to sell the house and buy an apartment. The house changed from 600 million to 500 million because of the repairs. Mija looked for a real estate agency to sell the property. A few days later she received the happy news that a young man was ready to buy the house. Kang paid 800 million. Mija never thought that someone would pay 200 million above the market price. Now she had enough to move into the apartment, but the amount offered by the protagonist ended up making Mija scared, and she assumed that there was something hidden. Her husband encouraged her to sell. Mija called the next day and said she would sell the house for 1 billion. She thought she was being smart because it would cost almost double the initial price. But that's when she received the news that the protagonist looked at another house in the region and seems to have liked it. The attendant said that the house in question cost 760 million. Mija dropped her purchases upon hearing this. The house for sale is Hyojong's. Mija started to insult her neighbor for stealing from her client. In addition, she thought that the woman's house was not worth 760 million. She was desperate and told the attendant that she would also be selling her house for 760 million, but the attendant replied that maybe the protagonist did not want to buy any more. Mija begged and even promised an extra commission if the attendant managed to change the buyer's mind. This worked and the protagonist opted for Mija's house. He transferred 30% of the amount as collateral. The next day the contract was prepared to be signed. The attendant reminded the Mija that Christmas would be in 4 days and asked if she could vacate the house by then. Mija replied that it was a few days and she didn't have time to look at another house. It would be very difficult to make this change. That's when the protagonist offered 20 million won for moving expenses. This money filled the woman's eyes and she immediately agreed. Kang was determined to buy this house because she once belonged to her father, so he was able to offer any amount for her. The attendant congratulated him for getting something so precious in his memory. She also warns that the contract comes out tomorrow. The attendant's cell phone rings and she starts to close a new deal. The protagonist just looks at her doing her job. After a few minutes he leaves the real estate agency. The streets are already all decorated. The boy finally got his long-awaited Christmas present. He holds a family photo while smiling. That photograph is one of the most valuable things engraved in his memory. The next day arrives and the protagonist's mother is ready to leave. She doesn't understand why this time they don't go home for dinner. Kang takes her to the parking lot where is Take, who also calls the protagonist's mother. As we can see, he didn't give up that shameful car. Everyone gets in the car and the mother tries to find out where she is being taken. The protagonist decides to give a clue and says that it is a very nice place. The conversation is interrupted when Kang's cell phone rings. He looks at the screen and realizes that it is Yuri. The protagonist answers and on the other end of the line the girl complains about him not answering any of her calls. Kang apologizes and asks how Christmas is going. The girl says that Christmas doesn't matter and he asks what happened. Yuri is direct and asks how he knew that L6 would be discontinued. The protagonist pretends not to know and asks what she is talking about. The girl remembers that he said that when they left the store that time. Kong replies that it was just a joke. This answer does not convince Yuri, and the protagonist decides to end the call, justifying that he is going to celebrate Christmas with his family. Yuri tries to say something when the call is disconnected. The protagonist realizes that he made a big mistake when he could not hold his mouth that day. In addition, Professor Sang also sent a message wanting to talk to him. Anyway, the protagonist does not intend to reveal his secret. At that moment, his mother asks him to stop here. Everyone gets out of the car and the woman recognizes the house she lived in with her husband a few years ago. The protagonist knows that this house is very important because his parents lived here for 20 years, until his father could not pay the bills and go to auction. The mother is thrilled looking at the place, but decides to leave so as not to disturb the owners. The protagonist holds her hand, saying that they have already come here and should take a closer look at the house. The mother asks him not to invade other people's houses, but as soon as he enters he realizes that the house is completely empty. The woman looks around and begins to remember the good times she spent here. The feeling she had was still the same as when she was young. The place conveyed peace and the best memories she could have, that time when her family was still complete. The mother thinks she has seen enough and asks her son to leave. Kong realizes that the woman feels like she is breaking into someone else's house and asks why she thinks that. The protagonist says that this house has always been theirs, they just rented it to someone else for a while. The woman doesn't understand anything that he is talking about. Kong takes the contract and says that this house is theirs again. The mother starts crying, asking how this happened. The protagonist explains that he and Take got some money to buy the house. Suddenly the woman falls to the ground and leaves the boys worried. She remembers all the bad times she went through since her husband passed away, but now she is happy that his son has become a good man like his father. Kong tries to calm his mother, who cries a lot. Take can't hold back his tears and cries even louder. Kong asks impatiently what happened to him. Now the protagonist is alone trying to calm them both. After a while, the protagonist told his mother about how he made money, obviously hiding some details, including the eagle with the prediction and the amount of money he received. The protagonist thought that she would be scared if she knew it was 800 billion, so he said that he won 1 billion only and left her scared all the same. Kong also decided to say that he would postpone university classes for a while longer because he wanted to focus on investments. The mother asked her son to be careful with this because she remembers her husband saying that investment involves many scammers. The protagonist hears this and can only think that in this case he is the scammer. Take is silent following the family conversation. Kong assures his mother that things will work out and that he will not borrow money from anyone to invest. The woman replies that she trusts him. Take enters the conversation, saying that he will take responsibility for little Kong. The subject changes and they finally talk about the repairs that the house needs. The mother understands that it won't be so cheap, but Kong says that he is already taking care of it and they will move out when everything is ready. Take reminds the two that it is almost time for the reservation he made at the restaurant. Everyone celebrated Christmas together as a big happy family. The protagonist feels that he is finally fulfilling the promise he made to his father. Now he can give a comfortable and worry-free life to his mother. After Christmas, things went back to normal. The mother worried about staying away from Kong for some time, but he promised that he would take care of himself. After that, the two said goodbye and the protagonist went on his way with his friend Take. They bought a 4 billion house that would serve as a base of operations for their investments. To be more precise, it was Take who paid. The protagonist hoped to move to a base, and when he arrived he realized that it was a luxury house. Take was responsible for dividing the rooms. He chose the first floor and the protagonist the second. Take felt that something else was missing and suggested that they go shopping after unpacking. The protagonist is against it because he thinks this house already has enough stuff. Take holds a card while saying that it's not about buying something specific. Kong looks at it without any interest. A few minutes later, the two arrived at the mall. The salesman asked if they needed any specific product. Take replied that he was just looking, and the protagonist questioned what he came here to do. It seems that his friend just wants a way to spend money. Suddenly something catches his attention and he starts screaming. The seller says that this is a recently released LED television, 100 inches with 8K resolution, and the price is 34 million won. Take doesn't let the man finish talking and warns that he will take it. The seller wasn't expecting to make such a quick sale and was scared, but Take wasn't willing to stop here. He walked around the store and chose several items. The purchase was finalized and the salesman asked how many times he wanted to pay in installments. The total amount is 68 million. Take says it is cheaper than he thought and chose to pay in full. The boys finally left the store after shopping. The attendants thanked them numerous times for their presence. The next day arrives and the protagonist is faced with the house all decorated. Take says he tried to turn the basement into something cozier. The rooms were also equally prepared. Now he is eager to show Kong how he prepared the studio. Kong is sure there will be feminine things, but he was wrong and the studio looked very ordinary. Take says that now only one thing is missing. Kong receives the corporate registration document. Now he is officially the CEO of OTK. Take asks if the guy liked the logo he created for the company. The protagonist complains that Take plagiarized the design of another company. The friend says he intends to change when they become famous. Kong thinks about the upheaval his life has had. He never imagined being the CEO of a billionaire company. Sometime later the friends talk about the next step. They are convinced that the best thing is to trust the prediction of the eagle, which was named Yeji. Kong makes it clear that if he could control Yeji, he could find out which stocks will go up and down, but the truth is that the eagle appears when he wants with the predictions. In addition, the information shown is extremely limited. The protagonist gives an example saying that Yeji can predict that the value of land in a specific area will increase tenfold, but there is no way for them to know if this will happen immediately or in 10 years. This happened when the protagonist learned that L6 would be discontinued. It took a long time for the prediction to actually come true. So the boy thinks it's better for them to analyze how Yeji works before making any investment. The protagonist also brings a third important topic to the conversation. It may be that one day the prediction is wrong or something unexpected can cause her to change. Take agrees with this and talks about natural destruction. It is something that the results of human actions can easily influence. The protagonist finds his friends thinking intelligent and asks how he thought of it. Take confesses that he saw something like this in the comics. Kong replies that this is obvious and goes back to quoting Seasung. Maybe they wouldn't even have received the billions if the company gave up on the discontinuation. Take is scared because he hadn't thought of this possibility. Kong presents numerous possibilities for the prediction to fail. What they need to understand now is that Yeji will play a crucial role, but it will depend on them for the prediction to come true. Take says it would be easier if he could control power like those comic book characters. Anyway, the important thing is to study the possibilities now. The friend asks if the protagonist still has his powers. Kong replies that he can't see but still feels a different sensation run through his body. Take is happy and says that he must take care of Yeji. Time passes and the protagonist is focused on his research. It seems that the press continues to report the financial crisis in Seasung. It will take a while for the company to stabilize. Kong reads the news until something catches his attention and he shouts for Take to take a look. Someone posted a message on the internet saying that he was looking for who bought the L6 put options. At the moment, a foreign company is focusing on finding out who was responsible for buying put options just before Seasung announces the discontinuation. The profit made from the put options is estimated in billions. Kong and Take look in disbelief at the headlines about them. The boys go down to the basement and decide to hold an emergency meeting. Kong starts by saying that they should have at least distributed the orders on several accounts, so they wouldn't raise suspicions. Take agrees but thinks they didn't do anything wrong. Kong replies that people who profit from long positions are usually praised, but those who profit from short positions are criticized. Long position means buying with the expectation that prices will rise. Short position means selling waiting for prices to fall. The protagonist chose to profit from the short position. Take still thinks that they did nothing wrong, but Kong is worried. The friend asks if he prefers to stop investing in short position. The protagonist replies that it is better to think of other methods so as not to raise any suspicion. The world has gone through a lot that has brought down the market financially, but they have risen again. This means that unless there is another shock at the level of the financial crisis, it is impossible to bet millions on a short position. Kong is willing to invest most of the assets in long positions and only use short positions when something goes wrong. The goal is to make OTK more powerful and buy other companies, so they can profit more. Take asks what return he expects and Kong says he expects to double 670 billion in 2 years. It seems that his friend thought it was little, but the protagonist reminds him that this is 1 trillion. The profit will be higher if OTK has an investment company, an affiliate and a subsidiary. Take gets excited about this option. The protagonist says that first they will start analyzing Kospi stocks. They will do this until Yeji comes up with a new prediction. Take agrees and the two shake hands. The protagonist spent days analyzing the Kospi company, but in the end he found nothing. Suddenly Take arrived with a pile of paper about the Kostak company. He preferred to print it for the protagonist to see better. Kong didn't believe the guy spent so much time on it. The next day Take wakes up and is surprised to find Kong still awake. The protagonist says he found something he wants to share. All this time they have been investigating the wrong tree. Take questions if the guy received a prediction and the protagonist replies that he didn't even need to. The friend then deduces that the plan to buy the company was wrong. Kong says that in fact the method and the way they are gaining shares is problematic. The plan would work with large companies that are worth tens of trillions in market value. But for companies with a market capitalization of less than 1 billion it is a problem. This is because OTK's participation is already billionaire, and when it comes into play it makes the stock price skyrocket or fall. There is no way for them to guess if it will work. Take thinks it is better to invest in foreign markets such as Vietnam, India and China. He knows some big companies such as the company Enpol and Gubal. The protagonist explains that to do this OTK needs connections first. Take suggests hiring a finance expert who knows the foreign market well. Kong likes the idea because hiring an expert makes it easier. He recalls that CEOs, more successful ones, have always had the best teams behind them. Maybe the best thing now is to establish only one investment company as a subsidiary of OTK and gather the talents that they need. The protagonist has a good talent option that he wants to recruit first. Suddenly the conversation is interrupted by a call on the phone of Take, and it seems that the guy didn't like to know who's calling. The protagonist is almost sure who the person is just by his friend's expression, mainly because this is the person he wants to recruit. Her name is Hyunju, Take's older sister and an employee of the global investment bank Golden Gate. Take answers the call and Hyun starts screaming asking where he went. The boy replies that he changed, and she demands to know the address to go see him. Kong is surprised that Hyun is in Korea, but he is also scared because he didn't expect the girl to be so angry. The protagonist decides to ask what Take did wrong, and the boy starts counting on his fingers. A few hours pass and Hyun finds the boys. The two sit on the floor as if grounded. Take gets up and complains about the cigarette smoke, saying that it is bad for his health. Hyun, with anger in his eyes, tells him to sit down. The boy obeys and she asks why he moved house. Take replies that it is obvious that he changed because he bought another house. The sister gets nervous and screams asking where the billions that were in his account are. Suddenly she starts hitting him with the ashtray. Kong tries to calm her down. Take understands that his sister's anger is for the amount he spent. At that moment Hyun decides to be direct and tell the reason for his anger. It turns out that after L6 was discontinued, a rumor about someone having bought a large number of electronic products from Samsung before the incident began to circulate. Oddly enough, this person has an account at Golden Gate, where she works. The name of the company responsible for receiving billions seemed familiar to Hyun. That day her superior ordered her investigate a transfer of 10 billion from a foreign account to a domestic account. Hyun obeyed and checked the account's transfer history. That's when he discovered the amount of 672 billion. The girl was so shocked that she ended up screaming. Take's name. The protagonist is shocked to learn that their story arrived at the Golden Gate. At this point Hyun asks his brother if he really accumulated Samsung Electronics put options. The boy confirms and she looks at him angrily. Take asks if this is a problem. Hyun yells asking if the boy did not understand that the Financial Supervision Service requested documents about him from the Golden Gate. The protagonist asks what kind of documents. The woman replies that they want the OTK transaction records and details about the owner of the company. The positive part is that Golden Gate doesn't even know who owns the company. They only know the country where the company was established. Plus the customer information can't be handed over so easily. Kong asks what reasons the Financial Supervision Service used to request the data. Hyun replies that they suspect insider trading. This news catches the boys off guard. Hyun gets angry that his brother caused such a mess. It could be that OTK is investigated. Kong is afraid that this really is a serious crime. In the worst case scenario the profits will be considered unfair gains. The boys already imagine the 672 billion won going away. Take believes that for this to happen he needs clear evidence to prove the use of insider information. The sister interrupts the conversation and asks how Take did it. The protagonist replies that it was he who was responsible for passing on the information. Hyun asks how Kong got the information and he is silent. Suddenly the girl throws the ashtray on the table, almost hitting the protagonist and asking if he doesn't understand the gravity of the situation. She says that if the boys can't explain where the information came from, it will be considered a financial crime. Kong understands that Hyun's anger is because she worries about the possibility of Take being arrested. That's why he decides to explain. The protagonist was not a fool to tell the truth and made up an excuse. He basically said that he came to the conclusion that L6 would be discontinued due to some explosions of the device. Hyun asks if that's when he passed the information to Take. The protagonist confirms that yes. She asks if her brother bet all the money even with the possibility of losing everything. Take replies that yes. Hyun feels that they are hiding something, but at least now he has something to prove that he did not receive privileged information. The boys remain silent listening to what she has to say. Hyun talks about Sweetgate, a company responsible for betting on the fall of shares and manipulating the prices of several companies to profit. The experts who manipulated the stock only earned 50 billion won. This is 10 times less than the amount that Take and Kong received. Hyun goes on to say that the regulations have become stricter thanks to Sweetgate, otherwise the investment funds would have collapsed one after another. In the last year, Golden Gate lost $20 million, thanks to two investors who dealt with a diabolical financial product in an even more cruel way. Obviously these investors were discovered. The protagonist is shocked by the information and mentally thanks Take for creating a company in a tax haven. Hyun says that they would already be handcuffed if OTK was a Korean company. But this will not happen because they can confirm that they did not have privileged information. Take finally breathes a sigh of relief, and Kong understands that his only enemy now is the companies that have suffered losses. Hyun says that he didn't expect his brother to cause such a big mess with 13 billion. She wants to know what he is going to do with the money. Take replies that he earns 2 and Kong earns 8. This means that now OTK has another CEO. Hyun starts asking annoyed if the protagonist has 80% of the company. Take says it's fair because the information came from Kong. The protagonist understands Hyun's frustration because it's common sense that whoever provides the capital gets most of the profits. She is more angry because now OTK has practically another owner. At this moment Take gives a smile saying that his friend will manage it very well, but the sister remains nervous and asks if he thinks he will be lucky next time. Take says he has a plan for it. He set aside 13 billion to live comfortably for the rest of his life. In addition, he left 3% of the shares to his sister, which in total of 20 billion. Kong concludes that the friend really is a generous otaku. He understands that Hyun is worried that the management of the company will be done recklessly, so he takes the opportunity to invite the girl to be part of the company. He even says that she doesn't need to leave Golden Gate to join them. At that moment Hyun orders the protagonist to go buy a coffee. Kong immediately understands that she wants him to leave and just obeys. Hyun was always at the top of her class. She finished school and entered one of the best universities for economics in Korea as the best student. After that she got a job at the Golden Gate. Hyun was recognized for her skills and promoted to team leader. On the other hand, Take spent half her life acting lazily. The protagonist believes that she would feel insulted if she accepted a job offer from someone like her brother, but he was mistaken. The protagonist returns home and is greeted with good news by Take. He says that his sister agreed to join them. At that moment Hyun asks his brother to go buy cigarettes. Take tries to argue saying that she should have asked the protagonist when he went to buy coffee. A look from his sister is enough for the boy to run away. Kong thanks the woman for agreeing to work with them. She replies that she would not refuse 20 billion, but not only that, Hyun says that for the first time she can see her brother happy with something other than anime. Now he is more motivated, but even so she feels the need to say that the investment was reckless. The protagonist prepares to hear the screams again. However, the girl says that it is surprising the results that they had, so she asks why Kong thought of investing. The protagonist replies that he did not have any specific goal and still does not think about any. He just likes to have a lot of money. Kong ends up letting slip that he has another goal. Hyun is anxiously waiting for him to speak. But the protagonist is thinking to himself that he doesn't have a normal life since the first prediction. Kong knows that all great investors have succeeded with their own investment methods, while he can only rely on one prediction. But that's not bad for someone who knows how to use luck and intuition well. Thinking about it makes Kong more confident and he tells Hyun that he is sure he can improve. The girl finally shows a smile. She decides to tell the protagonist that the financial world is not as easy as he thinks. She has been working in this sector for almost 10 years and knows that it is full of con artists, so she didn't want the boys to get into it. The protagonist says he understands the concern and assures the girl that Take will be fine. Hyun confesses that he is happy to see that they are still together. This gives more confidence and she decides to agree. The protagonist stands up and the woman raises her hand saying that she is looking forward to work. Kong shook her hand wishing for a good partnership. That's how another person joined OTK. The days go by and now the protagonist has someone to talk to about business. He asks by phone what Hyun thinks about opening an investment company separate from OTK. The woman replies that it is a good idea and asks what kind of company he intends to open. Someone contacts Hyun and she leaves it to talk to the protagonist later. He then decides to ask Take if the boy intends to change the name of the company. The friend asks if OTK is not good. The protagonist does not like it because it seems an abbreviation of otaku. Take explains again that OTK is the abbreviation of his name. In addition, there are many companies with the names of their founders. The protagonist thought about changing the name, but gave up when he remembered the last prediction he had with the name of OTK. Kong also comments that he could give Hyun the 3% of his share. Take is against it because the girl is his sister and it should come from him. The protagonist says that the next step will be to find a competent and reliable person in charge of the investment company. Take asks if he has someone trustworthy and the protagonist replies no, but she has already told Hyun about the plan and she is working on it. At this moment the girl sends an internal report from the Golden Gate. Take asks if it is allowed to steal internal materials. The protagonist points to himself and says that they cannot deny something like this to the main customer. Only the best customers can request and receive various information. Take realizes that all the information is in English. Kong says that the important thing is the numbers and the graphs. The content is basically about the Fourth Industrial Revolution. Take asks what this means. The protagonist replies that it is about the development of robotic technology and artificial intelligence. Take still does not understand. At that moment Kang's phone starts ringing and he sees that it is Sang. The protagonist says that he was busy these days and couldn't get in touch. The teacher invites him to dinner and catch up. The scene changes to the restaurant. Kong says that the teacher looks good in a suit and asks if he has other plans for tonight. Sang replies yes and says that today dinner will be on him. The protagonist questions if the man shouldn't be teaching today. Sang replies that he resigned after he managed to pay off all the debts. Kong is surprised because he remembers that the man was broke. The professor quickly surprises him by saying that it was all thanks to him who told him that L6 would be discontinued. The protagonist asks scared if Sang also bought the put option of Samsung Electronics. The professor says no because he did not believe it would be discontinued, but invested in something else. After so many explosions he knew that Samsung would opt for battery replacement. This happened and this time the SB battery manufacturers suffered a drop in shares. Sang says he bet 700,000 won on the fall of SB. The protagonist is thoughtful and concluded that the professor is right. It makes sense that Samsung SB shares plummet after announcing that the cause of the explosion was the battery. At that moment the protagonist asks how much Sang earned with this investment. The man shouts that he won 150 million by investing 700,000. This is the good part of betting on the fall of a company. The profit is absurd because you are the only one investing. Kong did not imagine that the professor would take the information from L6 and invest elsewhere. This makes the protagonist understand why his teacher was called a genius. Sang says that he left school after paying off all the debts. The man then asks how much the boy's profit was. Kong thinks about whether he should tell the truth or not. The teacher understands that no one will reveal the amount and says that he knows it was around 500 billion. He found out from a friend in the financial sector about the rumors and imagined that the buyer would be the boys. Kong lies saying that they don't have that money to invest. Sang replies that only takes money would be enough to make the purchase. The protagonist knows that the teacher is very smart and has no way to hide the truth from him for long, but decides to keep lying, until Sang reveals that he knows that the company that bought the put option is called OTK, so he made a connection with Take's name. At that moment Take spits the water he drank in all directions. Kong wipes his face while praising his teacher's intelligence. Sang replies that he called him here because he wanted to thank him. The protagonist can't shake the idea that if the press finds out that he and Take are the buyers, their faces will be plastered all over the headlines, so Kong asks the teacher to keep the secret. Sang says he never thought of leaking this and promises that he will take the secret to the grave. The boys finally go back to drinking and the teacher is curious about the protagonist's next investments. After all, they have already created a company. Kong remembers that the initial idea of creating OTK was just to free the money from taxes. Sang advised the protagonist to be careful with his next investments because from now on he will need something other than analysis to beat the market. The professor realized that this was necessary in the worst way, when unfortunately he made a wrong investment and went bankrupt. Kong says that there was no way for Sang to predict that the company would fail. The professor agrees that Financial market has many variables, and at that time it was impossible to solve things mathematically. Sang even makes a quote about being able to calculate the movement of celestial bodies, but not the madness of people. The protagonist accuses the professor of plagiarizing Isaac Newton's words. Take is like a fool because he doesn't recognize the quote. Sang says again that it's not easy to stay calm and see the truth in the financial market, so he preferred to trust the protagonist's intuition. Kong continues to sweat cold and asks what he plans to do. Sang says that he prepared this suit especially for an interview. The protagonist finally understands that the interview that the crazy one is talking about is with him. At that moment Kong turns to take, almost asking for help to get out of this situation, but the friend just looks as if to say that he is the CEO of the company. Kong recognizes that foresight is not everything for a company to work. That's why he recruited Hyun, but it would be interesting to have someone who has a good specialty in calculus like Sang, who is also very good at making rational judgments based on numbers, not to mention that the professor is ready to work with the same investment goal. So the protagonist tells that he is currently CEO of the ODK company and is looking for someone who is reliable enough to work in the company and suit his vision. At that moment an awkward silence hangs over the three. The protagonist stands still, with a bottle of drink raised while the teacher says nothing and Take starts to tremble. Suddenly Sang screams enthusiastically. He kneels while raising the glass towards the bottle, then says he doesn't care about the boss's age, since they have the same goal. The professor is also responsible for doing a thorough investigation and testing the best possibilities to make money. The protagonist smiles, pleased to have someone as smart as Sang on his team. He quickly greets the new member of OTK. After that the friends go back to drinking. Sang confesses that he was afraid of not being accepted. Now he doesn't know if he should call Kong CEO or president. The protagonist replies that he can call him by the same name as before. He intends to think of an official title only when he has other employees. Sang asks if there is anyone else on the team and Take replies yes. His older sister Hyun, who works at the Golden Gate. The teacher assumes that it is thanks to her that the boys were confident in making such a high investment. The protagonist preferred not to reveal that in fact the girl only entered after they managed to raise the capital. Sang says that the school asked him not to quit work, but he did it anyway because he was tired of the routine. The professor adds that now he intends to catch the wave of reorganization of industries. Kong asks what this means. Sang shows his new cell phone from Empel and says that when he was launched, the companies that dominated the market simply ignored the device, because they did not believe that the smartphone would have space in the market, but they were mistaken and tried to go back when they saw the success. But it didn't do any good. It's because that Sang believes that the best thing to do is to observe what no company has been able to see. The protagonist asks if he is sure of this and the teacher confirms. Kong knows that the man has spent years studying the market, so he trusts that he has no mistake. Take also says that he believes in Sang and is trusting in his abilities. The three toast at the same time, celebrating the new partnership. Suddenly the scene changes for the boys lying in the room. It seems that they drank more than they should. The next day the protagonist wakes up not knowing how he got home or what time it is. His phone rings with a call from his mother. Kong says that everything is fine with him and Take. The woman says that she will prepare some dishes and take them tomorrow. The protagonist thanks him and hangs up. A few minutes later Kong sits on the couch thinking about the next investments. Take goes downstairs complaining of a headache. Suddenly Kang's cell phone rings and the friend says that it is a certain Shin Yuri. By the name it looks Japanese. The protagonist confirms that it is a Japanese and asks if the guy doesn't want to sleep a little more. Take finds the kind way he is being treated suspicious and decides to find out for himself who the girl who is calling is. The guy ends up answering the call and Kong is annoyed because now he is forced to speak. On the other end of the line a female voice asks why he didn't answer before. The protagonist replied that it was because he was sleeping and she commented that she called numerous times in the previous days. Kong didn't know what else to invent and just apologized. Yuri decides to call him to run a little. She also wanted to thank him for the information about the discontinuation of L6. The protagonist finally complies with it. Girl's request and accepts to go out with her. Yuri screams with happiness and sets up the meeting in front of the gallery's department store at 2 p.m. The protagonist hangs up the call and suddenly finds Take looking at him closely. Kong gets scared and his friend asks who Yuri is. Take asks if the CEO of the OTK company is dating at such an important moment. If it is true he is ready to show his duties. The protagonist prefers to take aside and focus on the lack of money in his wallet. He realizes that he forgot to withdraw money, and to make matters worse he knows that things near the department are more expensive, so the protagonist approaches his friend embarrassed and asks to borrow money. Take asks if he is looking to buy an island. Kong replies that he didn't have time to redeem it from the external account, so he asks for 100,000 won and promises to pay later. Take hands over the money and asks the boy not to go around flaunting. The protagonist arrives at the appointed time in front of the gallery department. Yuri comes running towards him with a smile on his face. She asks if she made him wait too long. Kong replies that he has just arrived and asks if Yuri wants to eat. The scene changes to a small restaurant. The girl comments that she didn't expect the protagonist to arrive so quickly, and he replies that he moved to this neighborhood a short time ago. Yuri pats Kong and says that now they will be neighbors. The protagonist also seems happy with the news and realizes that the girl is very nice. Kong compares Yuri to his ex-girlfriend Siona, who was always in a bad mood. At that moment the protagonist stares at Yuri while wondering if she will always be cool like this. At that moment the girl notices his look and asks if everything is okay. The truth is that the protagonist was admiring her beauty while eating. After lunch the two decided to pay the bill. Kong insisted on paying and the girl refused, saying that he could pay the next time they left. After that the two left the restaurant and Yuri commented that he didn't want to have lunch alone, so he was happy for the company. The protagonist asked if she was going to have lunch alone today, and she replied that she does it every day because she lives alone. Yuri points to a building and says that he lives there. Kong is surprised to learn that she lives alone in a huge apartment near the Han River. The girl invites him to check out the place up close, promising that he will like it quite a bit of the place. After a short walk the two arrived at the apartment complex. Kong comments that the place is very beautiful and says that it is funny because he has never heard her talk about the sights near his house. Yuri confesses that he does not go out much. Kong asks how long she has lived here and the girl says that she lived when she was little, then he left and returned 6 months ago. The protagonist knows that to live in a place like this you need to have a lot of money, and assumes from the girl's appearance that she owns the apartment. He then asks out of curiosity where her parents are. Yuri replies that they stayed abroad working. Kong says that house prices here must be quite high and she replies that smaller houses cost about 2.3 billion won. The protagonist knows that the price is even higher if it's an apartment overlooking the Han River. The two keep commenting on the price of houses here, until Yuri interrupts the protagonist and says she wants to ask something. She starts stuttering when saying this since the time they bought the cell phone together. There's something that's been in his head and heart lately. The protagonist hears this with a funny face. It turns out that the boy remembered asking if he had a girlfriend. At that moment Yuri questioned how he knew L6 would be discontinued. Kong was prepared for a statement, but was relieved to realize that it wasn't. The protagonist feels that he is being chased by this question and tried to avoid it on the call, but now there will be no way. Kong lies, saying that after the launch he saw some comments from users calling the smartphone a bomb. Yuri laughs embarrassed and confesses that he thought something else. The protagonist also forces a smile, but is startled when he realizes that she was almost finding out about his prediction. The girl just shows sadness because she wanted to know in advance that cell phone was no good. Even her mother commented that she should have sold it before. The protagonist continues to sweat cold and hope that this matter ends. At this point Yuri asks Kong if he thinks it's better to sell the smartphone. The protagonist remembers the Golden Gate internal report and says that maybe it's better to keep it. Yuri thinks it's a bad idea because he believes that Seosung has lost the trust of buyers. Kong thinks differently and reminds the girl that she chose to change her cell phone instead of getting her money back. He decides to share one more thing he found out in the report and says that Seosung's main business is not smartphones, they are semiconductors. The girl asks what it is and he says that it is basically connectivity. Semiconductors serve as sensors and are responsible for the ability to communicate in objects to connect them to the internet. The whole world makes use of them. This means that Seosung will continue to have money because the demand for semiconductors only increases. After saying this the protagonist walks away and says that this is just his opinion. Yuri says that he has no way to predict what can go wrong because even financial experts make mistakes. It may be that Seosung goes bankrupt or not. The girl runs to him and says that she will trust his opinion, deciding not to sell any electronics she bought. The protagonist asks confused if she bought anything else. The girl smiled, saying that she bought 20 shares with the money from the allowance. Kong is surprised realizing that the girl's family really is billionaires. They give an allowance of 20 million as if it were nothing. Suddenly a voice calls for Yuri, and she says that it is the grandmother. The lady asks if the protagonist is her boyfriend and he replies that it is a friend from the university. The old woman tries to convince Yuri to marry by saying that she is already getting old. The girl immediately disagrees. Meanwhile, the protagonist cannot forget the fact that Yuri buys shares of 20 million as if it were nothing. The old woman convinces her granddaughter to take a little money to have fun, then she leaves. The protagonist asks the lady to be careful. Yuri comments that this lady is not actually her grandmother, she was a very dear neighbor who always helped her as a child. The girl also remembers that the lady used to have a store in the department store gallery, but today she lives on the rent of 3 apartments. Kong realizes that at least this old woman must be rich. Yuri says that the rich will always sit on a pile of money, even when they are old. The protagonist looks at the girl thinking that she will be that kind of person in the future. Yuri goes on to say that when the lady came to live here, the price per house at that time was 18 million won. Nowadays the property costs approximately 1,500,000,000, but time passes and the value is increasing. This means that this lady is one of the richest in the place. The protagonist hears this and comes to the conclusion that companies work in the same way as real estate. The ultimate goal of most companies is to go public and make huge profits as soon as they are listed. Listed means that the company's shares are available for public trading. So to be successful, it is better to invest in a company before it is listed. Many investors lose money exactly by starting to invest as soon as the company is listed, aiming for the highest profit. But that's when they make a mistake and lose money. The ideal is to invest in the initial phase to receive great returns. At that moment, the protagonist realizes that his head finally worked after so many days thinking about what the next step would be. The boy now understands what he has to do and says he needs to go. Yuri asks why he is going so suddenly. Kong feels he has the best ideas when he is next to the girl, then he thanks her and promises to see her as soon as possible. Yuri gets frustrated because that's how he left her last time and disappeared for a long time, but Kong didn't care and ran away. He also left a text message to Hyun where he wrote a list for her to take to the next meeting. The protagonist came home after running so much and came in screaming for Take. The poor boy had his game interrupted. Take asks if he had another vision and Kong says no, then starts to explain the idea he had after concluding that the apartment renovation and the company's IPO process are similar. IPO means initial public offering. The protagonist's theory is that the best phase to invest in a company and an apartment is in the initial phase, because over time it will appreciate and cost more. Take asks if this was the conclusion that he reached after going out with the girl. Kong asks him to pay attention and gives the example of what happened during the Industrial Revolution. Cars replaced carriages just as new industries replaced existing ones. The protagonist also mentions several well-known companies that replaced others that were famous. In the past, things took time to be replaced. Nowadays a lot has changed, but there are things that have survived from the last century to today and are still very famous. This made the protagonist certain that the first step now is to choose a company that has a chance of survival. Take is about to refuse the idea because promissory companies can also fail overnight, but he finally understands what the protagonist means when he remembers the similarity that his friend made with the apartments. Take asks if they will increase the investment time and receives an affirmative answer. The boy starts screaming that he is ready for a successful startup. Kong says that this is exactly what they will do. Take recognizes that finding a promising startup is a challenging task for ordinary people, but not for someone who has powers. The protagonist shouts that his friend is right. Foresight can help them find successful startup. The next day arrives and the protagonist receives a visit from his mother. She appeared with several plates of food and wished the boys a happy new year. The woman continued to put food on the Take plate and the protagonist complained that his friend was eating too much, that lunch was enough to catch up on the whole conversation. At dusk the protagonist's mother prepared to leave. Kong convinced her to take a taxi instead of a bus. The woman praised the boy's new house and the neighborhood where they are living. The protagonist asked if she wanted to live here too, but she refused because she prefers to live in the house her husband built. Kong is happy with these words. The taxi arrives and the mother begins to say goodbye, saying that her son has to eat better. She also hugs him, showing all the affection and gratitude for everything he did. After that the woman gets in the car and leaves. The presence of the mother makes Kong more sure that it is necessary to continue working now so that in the future there is no lack of money. Later that day, Hyun sent the initial investment list of the Golden Gate Company, just like the protagonist asked. Take is surprised that all the startups are migrating to the Golden Gate, but he doesn't understand why Kong also asked for a list of the companies that were narrowly rejected. The protagonist says that if they were narrowly rejected, maybe he just needs funds to grow quickly. Take understands the explanation and keeps complaining about the amount of companies he needs to review. The protagonist replies that this should not be a problem for someone like Hyun. The job from now on will be to monitor the stock markets, as well as check global economic policies and trends daily. Kong believes that it is something very easy for someone who works at Golden Gate and is a team leader. He doesn't even know how a person as talented as Hyun can have a brother like Take. The friend feels attacked by this line, while Kong is a little bothered by the pile of papers on his desk that need to be reviewed. He even asks if Take pushed the shares to him just because he didn't want to work. The guy denies it and remains focused on the game. At the end of the night, Take falls asleep. Kong is still reviewing the material he received when he suddenly has that familiar feeling. The next moment the protagonist gets up and punches the pile of paper with all his might, causing all the leaves to fly. Take wakes up scared and scolds him for the mess, saying that he is not allowed to do these things just because he has superpowers. Kong has a smile on his face and replies that for some reason his senses have improved. Then he asks his friend to spread all the leaves on the ground in a way that he can see from afar. Take obeys and the protagonist raises his hand towards the leaves. The boy has the same feeling as before and seems to have understood what it means. He hands Take some sheets and says that he can throw it away. The friend asks if this is an elimination process, and Kong says that it is the first round of the test. In the second round it will take concentration to read and have an idea. Take wants to cry just thinking about the work that this will take, but his expression changes when the protagonist says that he will be responsible for it. The next day arrives and Kong is working at full speed. He uses the same method as before and leaves the papers scattered on the table. Then they are scattered on the floor and the work continues. Several days pass and the protagonist reproduces the same methods, without stopping to rest. While working, Take is undecided about which is the cutest character for today's game. 10 days pass. Kong managed to reduce that amount of leaves to a small block. Take encouraged him to rest and he said he couldn't stop now. His senses have sharpened in the last few days, and that's why he has come so far. Take replies that it's like leveling up. At this point the protagonist tries to refocus on his instincts while his friend continues talking, but Take's voice is lost as Kong concentrates. The protagonist is forced to close his eyes, and when he opens it he finds himself in a totally different place with water covering his foot. Kang's attention is soon directed to something shiny. It's a unicorn that shines as brightly as the eagle. Suddenly that fanciful being runs at full speed towards it and the protagonist protects himself with his hands instinctively. The unicorn disappears, leaving a few words in the air. Kong seems confused about that prediction, but then the unicorn returns and starts running in the opposite direction. This time the prediction is more complete. The protagonist thanks the horned horse for appearing. Kong leaves that place and starts to wake up. He goes downstairs and asks his friend how long he slept. Take replies that 20 hours. The protagonist is shocked and deduces that he fell asleep while reviewing the documents. He also remembers seeing a unicorn in the dream. Suddenly Kong screams that he forgot the ideas he had during that moment. The friend reassures him by saying that he kept all the papers with the ideas. The protagonist breathes a sigh of relief and says that it's time for work. Take reviews what he has so far and he remembers that his investment targets are unlisted companies, so he suggests forming a specialized negotiation team to invest. Kong is against the idea because opening an investment company and recruiting talent will take a few months. Take asks what they should do then. The protagonist remembers seeing the name of 2 companies in his vision. The goal now is not to lose either of the 2, and for that it is better to reach them in 2 ways. A little later the scene changes to a hotel. Professor Sang is dressed accordingly and wonders where the boys are. The man was nervous because he arrived before the meeting time. He arrives at the door and is in doubt whether to enter or not. Inside the room it is possible to hear some voices. The protagonist is reunited with Hyun and Take. He says that he thought about reaching companies posing as someone from the Golden Gate. Hyun asks if the protagonist has ever seen the value of the commission fee to contact any startup. The commission for an investment of 500 million costs 9 million. The minimum commission even without any investment is 3 million. Sang is still on the other side of the door and is paralyzed when he hears the amount. Take asks why the connection fee costs so much. The protagonist replies that the amount could be higher if they didn't have Hyun's help. The teacher at that moment feels ashamed for having celebrated that he won 150 million in front of the boys, since now he has found out that Taek and Kong are billionaires. The conversation continues inside the room and Hyun says that he has scheduled some meetings with foreign startups. Taek asks if they can't invest in Korean startups and the protagonist replies no, if they do that the Financial Supervision Service will definitely investigate them. The friend says that it's okay because they are not doing anything wrong. The protagonist replies that the problem is that his identities will be revealed during the investigation, his data will also be exposed. People will find out about his investment method in short positions and also about the company established in a tax haven, so the protagonist feels more comfortable hiring foreign startups, mainly because he wants his mother out of any exposure. Taek seems to agree initially, but questions if they will give up on Korean startups. Kong replies that this is exactly why he has a second alternative, where OTK will not be responsible for contacting other companies. At that point Kong asks the professor to come in. Sang apologizes for standing at the door and Hyun gets up to greet him. The protagonist introduces Sang and the man seems to be quite embarrassed in front of the girl. Then Kong also introduces Hyun. Sang didn't know that there was such an experienced person with so many skills in the group. The protagonist asks the teacher to relax because they are all friends. Sang asks how the boy found out that he was out there. The protagonist replies that he knows that the teacher always arrives early, but also assumed that he would only come in when the clock beeped the time of the meeting. Kong gives a quick summary explaining that they plan to open an investment company as a subsidiary of OTK Company. OTK Company will be 100% shareholder. Kong also says that the capital of the subsidiary company will be 70 billion and he wants the teacher to be responsible for her. The man is shocked to hear this because it is a very big responsibility. Kong keeps talking that Sang will start with an annual salary of 100 million, but he will earn more contribution shares if the performance increases. Sang gets goosebumps when he thinks about the amount of money and concludes that with 70 billion it will be possible to create some important companies, but he doesn't understand why they are entrusting something so valuable to him. Sang remembers that every time he got something right about values it was because he was lucky. Now looking at the people at this table it is clear that they are very intelligent. This makes the teacher feel a little inferior, but he recovers his humor because he believes that there is some reason to be chosen. His mind is also already calculating numerous possibilities. The protagonist tries to calm the professor by saying that he saw the man go bankrupt and recover the money in moments. That's why there is no one more fit for this role than him. Kong also clarifies that he doesn't want to force Sang to do anything, but the office is already available. The man is surprised because he had already chosen an office. Kong looks at the photo of the office in question and says that the teacher always has the best choice, so he knows that he is the best for the position. Taek is happy with the choice and says that they can now choose the name of the company. Hyun and Kong are against letting Taek choose the name of one more company. Sang observes the group with a smile on his face. He stands up and tells everyone that he has a name suggestion for the subsidiary company. The plan now is for OTK to invest internally, maintaining a special relationship with Golden Gate, but hiding the relationship with the subsidiary company. Thinking about it would be cool to give the name of Guardian to the subsidiary company. They can also abbreviate it just to K. Taek likes the suggestion and says that he thinks it's beautiful the name of a company to have only one acronym. Kong also liked it and finally declared Sang as CEO of the national investment firm called K. A few days after Hyun establishes the branch of K Company in Korea, Kong advanced the work and handed the USB with the list of investments in Korean startups to Professor Sang. Now everyone is gathered in the office that the protagonist bought. Taek praises the view and asks why he chose this location. Kong replies that it is because it is close to the airport and it is easier to take care of investors. Hyun finishes the work and says that a lawyer from Golden Gate will help during the schedule. Kong asks surprised if he will have to find a lawyer today and the girl confirms it will be a lawyer specializing in international law. Hyun adds that the girl will arrive today since the airport is next to the office. Suddenly a noise is heard and the lawyer enters through the door. Hyun is shocked by the speed and calls her by Ellie's name. The girl greets her back. The protagonist is shocked because he didn't know he was going to work with a woman. Taek seriously asks if the CEO is already in the mood to date again. At that moment Ellie approaches and greets them both. The girl expected to find older men. She decides to leave her bags in the room and meet with them later. Hyun agrees and the girl leaves. The protagonist asks curiously where Ellie is from. Hyun says he thinks the lawyer was born in Hong Kong but is not sure because she speaks 4 languages: Cantonese, Mandarin, English and Korean. Kong is shocked because apparently the girl is his age and is already a successful lawyer who speaks 4 in the languages. Hyun interrupts his thoughts and says that he has already explained the story to Ellie. The Golden Gate does not know who owns the OTK. This means that Ellie believes that they are just OTK employees. So Hyun advises telling the truth to the girl because the lawyers have a confidentiality agreement. He thinks Ellie won't say anything to anyone. The protagonist says he will trust the lawyer, but before he decides to pretend to be an ordinary employee, Hyun agrees and asks if he is ready to invest. After some time the meeting finally starts. It is explained that there are 2 main types of corporate investment: shareholders and lending money to the lender. Shareholders have a stronger voice in management due to participation in the capital. Take feels sleepy listening to the explanation. The protagonist asks if he is not nervous and the boy questions why he would be. Kong starts sweating and blames his suit for this. He also notices that Ellie and Hyun seem very comfortable with it, meeting as if it were just another day-to-day task. At that moment the protagonist decides to check the meeting schedule since he is not able to concentrate. Suddenly Ellie realizes that the boy does not sit still and asks if there is something wrong. Kong is about to answer when the door opens. 2 Americans representing the Facete company enters. The one in the red blouse is Gerald and the one in the green blouse is Toby. The protagonist doesn't understand why the men are dressed like this and fears that the date will get out of hand. But it's important that these guys are here because the Facete company appeared in their prediction. Suddenly Toby scares everyone with a scream, saying that Faceit is going to be the biggest in the adult industry. The man takes advantage of the fact that he got the attention to explain that the current size of the adult industry in the US is $15 billion. The value keeps increasing. This means that the adult industry is a huge market. The current companies are lagging behind because they do not adapt to modernity. So far Take has only understood the word adult. Kong replies that man is doing a market analysis. The model created by Toby and Gerald is to replace a very famous website, providing users with the content they want, such as VR and AR technologies for example. Faceit aims to dominate the adult industry market as soon as possible. Toby likes to work in this market because it is the most consumed lately. He also thinks that using the necessary technology can make users choose what they want to watch. Take with his impure thoughts thinks the idea is genius, but Hyun doesn't think it is worth investing in, since people can look for adult entertainment elsewhere besides the internet. Take yells asking what she knows about adult things. After much discussion, Kang's subsidiary company invested $9 million to acquire 80% of Faceit. The next meeting was with M Pizza Company. They use delivery trucks to bake the pizza and deliver it fresh. This is another subject that Take likes and he says that the company will be a great success. Her sister disagrees again and they get into yet another argument. Ellie is also in favor of the investment. In the end they invested $7.5 million in M Pizza. The meeting finally ends and the protagonist lies on the bed complaining of exhaustion. He asks if Take isn't tired and the guy replies no. The protagonist says that it's surprising how Hyun deals so calmly. He already feels tired just thinking about the meeting he will have tomorrow. Suddenly Kong gets out of bed and Take asks if he wasn't going to sleep. The protagonist replies that he is going to get some fresh air. Kong walks while remembering his ex-girlfriend. Siona ended the relationship because she wanted to succeed, but it seems that he arrived at success before her. At that moment the protagonist leaves the hotel and runs into Ellie. The girl says she is running because she is tired of spending so many hours sitting on the flight, but now her training is over, so he calls Kong for a beer. The scene changes to a liquor store. Kong asks if it's her first time in Korea. Ellie replies that she's been here 3 times, but it's her first time here for work. The protagonist thanks her for the help. Ellie confesses that she didn't expect that the company that turned the financial sector upside down was run by Hyun's younger brother and his friend. Kong asks if they really caused such a big mess. Ellie replies that the explosion at Samsung Electronics was a global problem. Even Golden Gate was affected, but it was thanks to OTK that Golden Gate's balance earned $600 million. The two toast together. Kong is happy to have one more tipster inside Golden Gate. He says it was just luck. Ellie disagrees as predicting the discontinuation of L6 and making bold investments is not something that only luck can achieve. Kong agrees. He also realizes that he was able to put together an amazing team after the success with the discontinuation of L6. Ellie asks if he knows that people think OTK is a Japanese investment company. Kong says it must be because of the name. The girl confesses that she thought it was a joke at first, until she hears Take's name. Kong is embarrassed. Ellie remembers that tomorrow she will have another meeting and decides to end the drink for today. They go back to the hotel and the elevator stops on Ellie's floor. They say goodbye. Suddenly the girl remembers something and tells the protagonist that she has a question. Kong is startled by Ellie's approach. She asks who his favorite actor is. The protagonist quickly closes the elevator door in her face without answering. The next day arrives and today's meeting is with a Chinese startup. Many successful startups have emerged in China in the past decade. Xiamen represents its own startup and wants to offer efficient logistics for transportation, as China still relies heavily on road transportation for logistics, and the biggest problem is random operations. There are not many routes for trucks to quickly return to companies. It was with this in mind that Xiaomi developed together with his friend an app to match carriers with drivers and optimized delivery routes. Hyun asks if they will be able to build a large-scale network on their own. Xiaomi replies that it is possible to get strong support from the Chinese government, who is also worried about this issue. The guys start talking to each other and the protagonist tries to understand but can't because he doesn't know a single Chinese word. At that moment, Ellie tells the men that they don't have to worry about being deceived. The Chinese are scared. Because they didn't expect there to be anyone in this room who spoke Mandarin, they happily ask where the girl is from and she replies that she came from Hong Kong. The protagonist doesn't understand anything Ellie is talking about, but is happy that the weather has improved. Even Xiaomen's companion felt more comfortable talking about the investments. After that the meeting ended and Hyun closed the remaining contracts. Kong was left doing nothing because the girls led the deals, Hyun especially. The next day the team got together to have breakfast together. Kong celebrates because today is a day off. Take says that unfortunately he will have to work on his day off and gets slapped by his sister, who knows that the only thing the boy does is stay all day in games. Ellie asks Kong if he has plans for today and he replies no. The girl says this is great and asks him to be her guide around the city. The protagonist finds the invitation unexpected and asks if this is a date. Take and Hyun start looking at the two. Ellie replies that maybe it's a date and Kong agrees to go. She then makes an appointment to meet him in an hour in the hotel lobby. The girl leaves and the protagonist asks for his friend's opinion. He thinks Ellie made a joke by inviting him. The friends were also in doubt. An hour passes and the protagonist waits for Ellie at the meeting point. The girl goes down the stairs and Kong takes her to the parking lot, but he is not satisfied with what he sees. Take hands over the car keys and the protagonist says he will not drive this thing. On the other hand, Ellie thinks the little girls are cute. Kong angrily asks why Take is doing this. The friend replies that it is better to drive your own car when going on a date. He also asks you to drive carefully and not hurt your baby, especially Kumi. The protagonist gets even more angry with the name of the characters. After that he gets in the car with Ellie. On the way the protagonist asks if there is any place that she wants to visit. The girl replies that she wants to visit a Korean university. Kong is surprised and Ellie says that she has not been anywhere else besides work or tourist attractions, but remembers that Hyun always talked about the Korean university. This piqued his interest. Kong didn't want to go back to that place, but he didn't want to say no to Ellie, so I decided to take her even though it was uncomfortable for him. Suddenly the protagonist remembers the biggest problem, which was in Take's car. Kong knows that he will become a laughingstock if any of his colleagues see him in that car. A few minutes later the two arrive on the university campus. Ellie asks if a stranger can enter and Kong replies that some places are allowed. He tries to get away from the car before an acquaintance shows up and fails. Suddenly the protagonist hears someone calling his name. It is his old friend Min. Kong greets him in a cold sweat. The guy next to Min notices the car. Kong starts to writhe with embarrassment. At this moment a girl named Lee Hyami approaches and asks if he is not ashamed to drive something like this. The protagonist asks why she cares so much about a car that is not even hers. Lee says that he should consider what people think and adds that it is uncomfortable to look at this thing. Min interferes in the conversation and tells the protagonist that he shouldn't pay attention to someone like Lee. Kong agrees and says that it's strange to see her after so long. Suddenly Lee starts screaming for Siona. The protagonist realizes that it's his ex-girlfriend and thinks it's the best time to leave. The guy next to Siona greets everyone and turns off the car alarm. which catches Kang's attention. Siona also looks and recognizes Take's car. Lee starts commenting again about the car that the protagonist came from. She says that she knows things have been difficult since his father passed away, but he didn't need to use a car like that. Kang gets annoyed when he hears the girl mention her father and tells her to repeat it again. Lee starts yelling that he raised his voice to her and that this is violence. Ellie tries to improve the mood and asks Kang if they are his friends. He reluctantly replies yes. The trio finally realized that the protagonist was accompanied. Ellie takes out a card and gives it to the boys, introducing herself as a lawyer for the Golden Gate. Everyone screams in shock and Lee starts reading the card. They didn't expect the girl to have such a high position in one of the largest companies in the country. Siona looks at Ellie without any expression on her face. The guy next to her introduces himself as Yang and raises his hand to Ellie. The girl greets him. Yang asks if she is visiting Korea and Ellie replies that she came for work. She also says that she decided to leave the hotel where she is staying with Kang to get to know the city. The college students end up understanding that the two slept together for several days at the hotel. Kang tries to explain that it is not quite like that and Siona's mood changes immediately. Yang talks to Ellie again and hands over his card. He tries to show that he is an important guy and says that his father's company has internal relations with Golden Gate. Ellie replies that she knows their company. This conversation is important for the protagonist to know that Golden Gate is financing the GH construction company. Yang also hands the card to Kang and says that he can look for it if he needs anything. The protagonist has an idea about what to do with this company. His mood even changes and Yang realizes it. At that moment Siona starts to leave and tells Yang to hurry. The guy thanks Ellie and wishes her a warm welcome. She thanks. Meanwhile Siona regrets that the protagonist didn't look at her even once. Lee doesn't like the attention Ellie is getting. She says out loud that there's nothing wrong with a Golden Gate lawyer. At the end of the afternoon the tour was finally over. The two walked together through the streets of Seoul. Ellie says that the girl from before was very beautiful. The protagonist asks who she is talking about. Ellie mentions the physical characteristics and he realizes that it is about his ex-girlfriend, but ignores it. Ellie then says that Siona is more beautiful in person. Kang questions when she heard about Siona and the girl replies that it was Take who told her. In fact he told the whole story of Kang and how Siona left him when he went to the army. Kang already begins to create a plan in his mind to end Take. At that moment Ellie asks if the protagonist still likes Siona and he denies it. After all, they broke up a long time ago and the story was in the past. Ellie likes to hear this. She runs in front of him and takes her hand in his direction, saying that she loved today's date. Kang smiled at the girl and replied that he liked it too. He touches her hand and holds hands for a while. The scene changes to Siona. Yang comments that she finally met her ex-boyfriend. The girl asks if he is jealous. The guy replies no, but he found the car he came in funny. Siona says that the protagonist has a very unusual friend. The car is probably Take's. Yang asks if she knows what Kang's connection is with the Golden Gate lawyer. Siona replies that she thinks it has something to do with Take's sister, who also works at Golden Gate. Hyun must have asked the protagonist to take Ellie to see the college since he is the only one who studied here. Yang says that he had found the protagonist normal at first, but was bothered when he realized that Kang did not show any interest after knowing his background. The guy was used to people increasing their ego, and that didn't happen. Yang adds that even big businessmen lower their heads when it comes to the power of money, but he felt that the protagonist looked like the two of them had the same status. The man keeps talking while Siona remembers that the protagonist didn't take his eyes off her on the last date, but today he hasn't looked at her once, so she gets annoyed to think about it. The next day arrives and the protagonist is in another meeting, this time with the company Arsit, which presents an architectural application through artificial intelligence, where computers learn data on their own to predict results or solve problems. The protagonist is excited because he is very confident that this company will grow. If the application develops, it will be possible to design super tall buildings. Arsit's goal is to recognize the project plans and deliver the complex result. In moments, he will be mainly responsible for the design. The protagonist is satisfied with it. Take still doesn't understand the company's development plan. Hyun leads the meeting and signs a contract with Arsit. The representatives leave and Hyun warns the boys that the next meeting is at 7, so it's good to be on time. Ellie takes advantage of the time she has and calls the protagonist to play squash. He says he can't because his body is a little stiff today. She gets worried and asks if everything is okay. The truth is that the protagonist doesn't know how to play and doesn't want to be embarrassed in front of the girl. Then he replies that he needs to rest a little. Ellie agrees and invites Take. But the guy is simply paralyzed. He also doesn't know how to play. Ellie decides to go alone and says that they can meet later in the meeting. The boys go to the hotel's break room. Take complains that he can't understand anything in these meetings, especially since they speak English. Kong tells his friend that at least he attends. Take replies that he can't help but support companies, especially the adult content one. He tries to convince the protagonist that his intention is just to know where OTK's money will be invested. Take also says that he expected the money to fall from the sky after these meetings, but everything seems very calm. At that moment the protagonist asks if he knows Song Masayoshi. Take immediately recognizes and questions if this is not the owner of the softbox. Kong corrects him by saying that Masayoshi is the CEO of the softbox. He wants to tell the story of this man, but first you need to know if Take knows the Alabama company. The friend asks if it is not that mall. Kong confirms and says that the Abe Mall dominated almost the entire Chinese e-commerce market, while Alabama was just one of the small companies in the middle of all the competition. One day the CEO of Softbox visited Beijing on business. The representatives of Alabama took the opportunity and immediately flew to request a meeting. After the meeting the CEO of Softbox invested $20 million in Alabama. People doubted that any company would surpass Abe one day. Masayoshi was harshly criticized by the board of Softbox. 20 years later Abe could not handle the pressure and lost space to Alabama. Nowadays, Alabama's market value is $330 billion, about 360 trillion won. Take spits out the drink and says that this is much more than Samsung. The protagonist adds that Softbox received 30% of Alabama's shares for its investment of $20 million. Take asks why the protagonist is telling this story to him. Kong replies that he told this because his friend complained that the return was slow, but the truth is that they need to follow the investment as if it were a newborn baby. The protagonist gives confidence to Take saying that he saw the name of the companies in the vision. Now it's time to invest and wait for the fruits. Just as the CEO of Softbox waited 20 years to have the return of 360 trillion, Take agrees that now it's just a matter of being patient and waiting for the fruits. The boy begins to imagine his 600 billion multiplying. Suddenly he shouts enthusiastically that he hopes there are so many numbers that his head gets tired of counting. The scream ends up drawing the attention of people walking inside the hotel. Hyun appears and tells him to sit in silence. The boy obeys. At that moment Hyun asks if the protagonist will want to schedule an emergency meeting. He asks why he would schedule, and she says that OTK received a message from that company that he wanted so much. Kang's mood changes and he seems anesthetized. The boy feels as if the most important thing in his life has fallen and broken. The name Karos echoes in his mind.